Hi everyone, please subscribe to my channel. Blood Immortal Venerable, see playlist for other chapters and novels. I do not translate the novels. Credits goes to original translator and author of the novel. I only make it as an audiobook so it would be easier to just listen while doing other things. Credits goes to the author of the novel. I convert stories to audiobook for mental health, for multitasking purpose, for accessibility and time saving. Listening to audiobook is also beneficial for people who have disability. It improves our listening skills and improve our English comprehension, vocabulary and other things. So, thank you for listening. Thank you and thank you very much for your support. Chapter 1781, The Veto Token. When the short halberd hit the invisible barrier, the sky above the heavenly Han house began transforming into an illusion of colors, as if various colors of inks had been dropped into water and were now bleeding and intertwining together. Just as the Han clan disciple had said, the restrictive power over the heavenly Han house was actually an enchanted barrier that had been created by borrowing the Thousand Commandments slate's power. This said barrier completely covered the sky above the heavenly Han house. Generally speaking, the barrier wasn't visible to the naked eye. In fact, nobody was capable of seeing it unless there was an enemy attack, then the barrier would activate itself. However, warriors who were qualified to fight in the six-burden divine city were top-ranked true gods, at the very least. True gods on Master Evil's level were considered powerless against the Thousand Commandments slate. 2 divine eras had already passed since the last time the barrier had activated itself due to an enemy attack. Everyone in the heavenly Han house, including the true gods and the proving godly warriors, all stared blankly at the sky. Only a few of the true gods who had lived for a long time already had seen the barrier being triggered in the past. This, though, was the first time the young warriors witnessed such a wondrous scene. Oh gosh, when Malloy noticed the flowing, blending lights, he suddenly remembered something important and his expression changed at once. At the same time, he spun his head to the side and roared, "Elder Chen! Hurry up, use the veto token, I'll give you a new one later." The true gods of the heavenly Han house, including the old man surnamed Wu, had gathered together on a small corner of the land. Every one of these true gods was equally paying close attention to each of Zen's movements. "Tell me, was it truly this young man who taught you the technique of breaking the 5-element godly way limitations?" asked a true god. Master Wu nodded his head. "At the time, I couldn't think of any other way to repay him, so I only gave him a white jade token. I never expected that he'd ever really have the strength to join the heavenly Han house, so originally, I had the intention of compensating him with other treasures. That said though, his strength surpassed everyone's possible expectations." As Master Wu spoke, the other true gods heard Malloy's voice coming from the other side. Elder Chen, the person that Malloy was speaking to, was the true god who was considered to have the most experience and prestige in the heavenly Han house. As Elder Chen heard Malloy's words, his expression quickly changed as well. He too was reminded of something important that had otherwise been overlooked by everyone. Beneath the cover of the Thousand Commandments slate, nobody in the entire six-burden divine city had the permission to fight. Here, any powerful energy fluctuation could lead to the Thousand Commandments slate's punishment. Despite this cover, during the heavenly Han house test, the rules of the place were much more lenient. Thus, the concerned proving godly warriors were capable of extracting their life vitality from their inner world and throwing the white jade token into the sky without the risk of suffering the slate's punishment. Zen, on the other hand, threw the short halberd so high up into the air that it struck the barrier covering the sky. Such a powerful act was equivalent to triggering the barrier. Although the blow from the short halberd hitting the barrier wasn't enormous, it was still recognized by the Thousand Commandments slate as an invasion signal. Hence, the barrier launched its highest level counterattack. The Thousand Commandments slate was of extreme power. If it were to attack with all its strength, even Malloy would be burnt to ashes. Although Zen's strength and talent were excellent, there was no way he'd withstand such a powerful attack. He would be eliminated in seconds. Never in the past had there been a proving godly warrior who could throw the white jade token to a height of 990 feet. Even a mid-rank true god would find it difficult to accomplish such a feat, let alone a proving godly warrior. This was due to the fact that, at the height over 900 feet, the restrictive power doubled every 10 feet. As the multiple continued to increase, by the time it reached 990 feet in height, the restrictive power within the space became extremely terrifying. But Zen had clearly managed to do so, and this had astonished Malloy to the greatest extent. In his perspective, Zen was probably on par with the geniuses of the floating islands. Zen was the proving godly warrior with the most powerful strength that Malloy had ever seen. If Zen really did die from the Thousand Commandments slate's punishment, Malloy would probably regret the latter until his own death. Buzz. At the center of the six-burdened divine city, a cyan slate could be seen floating in the air. On the slate were 1,000 rules written in small, golden words. These golden words were personally handwritten by the Holy Emperor of the Han clan, and these rules had been set long ago by the ancestors of the clan. Anytime someone violated the rules of the Thousand Commandments slate, the small golden words would begin to shine brightly. Right now, the words of a paragraph located in the middle of the slate began to flicker with light. At the same time, a sliver of lightning suddenly appeared above the slate. As the lightning continued to circle in the air, it slowly began to condense itself, finally forming a small ball of lightning. As the golden words continued flickering with light on the slate, the ball of lightning rapidly grew in size. From no bigger than a closed fist, it quickly became the size of a house. Crack, crack, crack. The outer layer of the lightning ball was a deep shade of indigo, while the inner layer was midnight black. This pitch-black layer contained the Thunder Tribulation's ultimate power. Once the lightning ball was completely formed, it flew straight toward the heavenly Han house, leaving nothing behind except a terrifying series of rumbling thunder in the air. Upon noticing Malloy's expression then, Zen realized that something was definitely wrong. At the same time though, Master Evil came to his mind with a reminder. Zen, you have to be careful. You seem to have triggered the Thousand Commandments slate, he said. Before, in the Mirror City, Zen had already witnessed the 10 Commandments slate's power. The Thousand Commandments slate in the six-burdened divine city was much more powerful than the 10 Commandments slate. Nevertheless, never had he thought that the heavenly Han house would be so careless. They obviously knew the danger of triggering the Thousand Commandments slate, and yet they still held such a test. Crack, crack, the ear-piercing claps of thunder were approaching, coming from the horizon and heading straight toward the heavenly Han house. Many intelligent warriors seemed to come to their own conclusions on what was going on and scattered in all directions in an attempt to avoid Zen. They were afraid that they would be implicated in the Thousand Commandments slate's punishment. It wasn't before long that the ball lightning broke through the heavenly Han house's enchanted barrier and plummeted toward Zen. The power contained within this lightning ball was enough to heavily injure and even kill a true god. The second it plummeted into the heavenly Han house, the powerful thunder energy formed a strong electric field, causing the hair of the 100,000 proving godly warriors to stand on end. Everyone had one same thought in their minds. This guy, who also went by the name of Thad, was absolutely doomed. Generally speaking, most people didn't have any conflicts with Zen. After they understood the whole of the situation, they usually felt nothing but pity for him. Zen had easily set an incredible record and his great talent would have, without a doubt, promised him a bright future. It was an unfortunate tragedy that he would die because of the heavenly Han house's negligence. To the contrary of most though, in Eric's and Zane's perspectives, Zen simply deserved it. From the moment Zen triggered the Thousand Commandments slate to the moment the Thousand Commandments slate imposed its punishment, less than a total of 6 seconds had passed. Elder Chen was ready to use the veto token as Malloy had asked him to. In fact, even if Malloy wouldn't have promised to compensate him with a new one, he would still have saved Zen's life without hesitation. As the greatest true god of the heavenly Han house, he still held this responsibility on his shoulders. However, as he patted his waist though, the features on his face began to distort themselves again. He forced an embarrassed and bitter smile as he said, "I didn't bring the veto token with me." Upon hearing Elder Chen's words, Malloy's heart sank and he felt overwhelmed with defeat. It seemed that Zen was truly doomed this time. The lightning ball was zooming in on Zen, and it was about to hit him. Something had to be done. It was a critical moment. In one of the far corners of the place, a girl could be seen wearing green clothes and blinking her eyes. She tilted her head slightly as she swayed her slender arm, and a token suddenly appeared in her hand. This token had the same shape of the white jade token, but the color and material were different. In the middle of the token, the word, veto, was written in big. This was the six-burdened divine city's veto token. Unbelievable. The veto tokens were made by the Han clan, and generally speaking, they could negate most of the rules on the Thousand Commandments slate. Of course, the Han clan knew that if there were too many veto tokens, the Thousand Commandments slate would become nothing more than a decoration, no one would take it seriously anymore. This mattered to the safety of the six-burdened divine city, and thus, the Han clan only made very few veto tokens. A veto token could sell for over 20,000 divine might coins in the six-burdened divine city. Even if someone could pay such a sky-high price, they'd still find it difficult to actually obtain a veto token. Currently, even the sub-branches of Han clan only had 3 veto tokens in their hands. None of them belonged to Malloy. Elder Chen, on his behalf, had made a great contribution for the Heavenly Han House by discovering 2 excellent disciples for the Holy Emperor. That was why the Han clan had rewarded him with a veto token. However, he had neglected to bring the veto token with him, therefore he couldn't offer to save Zen from the danger. Crack! The lightning ball was no more than 3 feet away from Zen now. Malloy and the other true gods of the Heavenly Han House had all subconsciously closed their eyes, partially in fear of what was to come and partially because they were all unwilling to watch his tragic death. Zen was already prepared to use his redemption armor in order to protect his body and then use his greatest strength to defend against the lightning ball. Even though he felt that his chances were slim, he knew he had no other choice. Despite this, a bitter feeling still arose in his heart. He never expected that his life would end like this, in such a ridiculous way. Right at that moment, the veto token in the girl's hand, who was still standing in the corner, suddenly emitted a red light, and with an incomparably fast speed, the token flew out of the Heavenly Han House, crossed half of the 6-burden divine city in the blink of an eye, and struck the 1,000 Commandments slate straight on. Simultaneously, the lightning ball strangely stopped above Zen's head, kind of just hovering there, just a couple of feet away from him. Even the lightning surrounding it, which resembled thousands of little snakes, had frozen like statues. Following a slight flash of light from the 1,000 Commandments slate, the rule was temporarily negated. The lightning ball began to disperse rapidly, and all the energy contained within it quickly disappeared without a trace. Chapter 1782, Causing Trouble. Zen stood on the spot while his body was still in a tense state. As cold sweat trickled down his back, his chest continued to heave non-stop. If the lightning ball descended another foot, he would also use his thurgy to defend himself. However, Zen was well aware that the 1,000 Commandments slate was powerful enough to kill a top-rank true god. With his current level of cultivation, resistance would be futile. Because of that accident, Zen had been caught off guard and almost gotten killed. If he had really died in the 6-burden divine city, it would have been too much for him to accept. He still hadn't achieved his ambition. Before the ball of lightning disappeared, Zen saw a red light leap out from a corner of the courtyard. Although he wasn't sure what that red light was, the disappearance of the lightning ball must have something to do with the red light. Curiosity became apparent in Zen's eyes. He turned his head and saw a girl in green clothes standing at the corner. She had a simple ponytail that revealed her pure white neck. Her chubby face was filled with a delicate aura. Even though it was in a ponytail, the girl's hair was still long enough to hang down her heels. At that moment, Zen wasn't the only one who focused on the girl. The attention of everyone in the courtyard was also stolen by her. Some of the young proving godly warriors' eyes lit up as they saw the girl. Their hearts thumped in their chests. Curious expressions could be seen on the faces of the proving godly warriors. No matter where she appeared, she would definitely attract countless gazes. Nonetheless, none of the warriors had noticed her before this moment. As for the people of the Han clan, including the true gods, their attention was naturally not on the girl herself, but on her hand. The girl's hand was fair and exquisite without a single wrinkle. In that hand, there was a token. On the token was a large, veto, word. It was the Han clan's veto token. Malloy held his breath, and then let out a sigh of relief. He thought that Zen was about to perish just now. He hadn't thought that this girl would make a move at that moment. The recent events had been beyond his expectations. A mixture of surprise and relief was seen on his face. Malloy also didn't know the girl. However, he knew that she was someone extraordinary. Of course, how could someone with a veto token be an ordinary person? With a few conjectures in his mind about the girl's background, Malloy approached her. A respectful expression appeared on his face as he cupped his hands towards her. He then said in a humble tone, "Young lady, thank you very much for saving him just now." The girl's bright eyes blinked as she looked at Malloy. She then waved her hand. "There's no need to thank me. Moreover, I saved him, so he should be the one thanking me." Malloy immediately agreed. "That's right, Thad Luo, this lady used the veto token to save your life. I think you should thank her." Malloy guessed that this girl was most likely from the Han clan on the floating island. As for why she wanted to return to the ancestral land of the Han clan and participate in the examination of Heavenly Han House, he had no idea. Regardless of her motives, he still paid her the necessary respect. Additionally, none of the people who had returned from the floating island could be neglected. When he heard Malloy's words, Zen also clasped his hands together towards the girl. In a gentle tone, he thanked her. "Thank you, young lady, for saving my life." The girl looked at Zen and raised the veto token that had already been used. An impish smile came across her face. She then said in a playful tone, "I heard that this token is worth a lot of money. I saved your life, so how are you going to repay me?" The reason she returned to the ancestral land of the Han clan was to offer sacrifices to the ancestors. The Han clan had already survived for countless years. Due to their ancient existence, they had long since become a great power. However, the Han clan was also very complicated. Every 10,000 years, all the members of the clan would go to the ancestral land to offer sacrifices to the ancestors together. Aside from that, the members of the Han clan on the floating island would usually return to the ancestral land alone. It was the first time the girl had left the floating island. As such, everything in the Six-Burden region was new to her. In the short time that she left the floating island, she had already toured the entirety of the Six-Burden Divine City. However, what left her with the deepest impression was still the scene where Eric challenged Zen in the Brilliant Moon restaurant. Zen's magnificent display of strength was deeply engraved in her memory. Along the way, Bruce told her not to have any expectations for the proving godly warriors in the Han clan's ancestral land. He said that although the divine land was vast, there was a huge gap between the strengths of warriors from outside the floating islands and warriors from the floating islands. The proving godly warriors were merely a little bit better than the divine citizens in the eyes of the warriors from the floating islands. Proving godly warriors from the floating islands could easily kill the proving godly warriors from outside the floating islands. The same was true for true gods, no matter low-rank true gods or mid-rank true gods. However, the bit of strength that Zen displayed in the Brilliant Moon restaurant was enough to completely refute Bruce's point of view. Just that bit of strength that Zen displayed was enough to instantly kill 90% of proving godly warriors on the Han clan's floating island. As such, a curious expression could be seen on the girl's face as she looked at Zen. Both the girl and Bruce knew that with Zen's skillful control over strength, his true abilities were on a higher level. Wouldn't such a person be able to match up to the true geniuses of the Han clan? Therefore, she became interested in Zen. However, Bruce didn't let her interfere in this matter and said he would send people to investigate Zen. In the end, she couldn't change his mind, so she could only give up. After she offered sacrifices to the ancestors, she still had plenty of time. A thought then entered her mind. The test of the heavenly Han house was very lively. She begged Bruce to give her a spot, and quietly entered the heavenly Han house. Before this, Bruce had even used the mask technique on her. After the mask technique was cast, a person's temperament was concealed. As long as she was in a crowd, she would not stand out at all. It was very difficult for others to notice her presence. As a result, when she entered the heavenly Han house, no one had noticed that there was such a girl in the corner. After she stayed in the heavenly Han house for a while, she saw Zen slowly walk in. When Zen broke his token, she was quite impressed. However, she didn't expect that when he threw the black short halberd out, it actually triggered the Thousand Commandments slate. Of course, the girl understood very well the power of the Thousand Commandments slate. Once the punishment from the slate was dealt with Zen, he would definitely die. She already had wanted to use her veto token to help him. However, when she heard that Malloy had asked Elder Chen to use his veto token, she immediately gave up on the idea. Never would she have thought that at the most crucial moment, Elder Chen would say that his veto token was not by his side. A mix of shock and anger crept upon the girl's heart for such a slow response from Elder Chen. Thus, the girl fiercely glared at Elder Chen as she silently cursed in her heart, "Why didn't you say it earlier?" Only then did she activate her veto token to reject the punishment of the Thousand Commandments slate. With quick action, Zen was saved. "How am I going to repay you?" Zen was startled and suddenly had a strange feeling. A confused look was seen on his face. When he saw that Zen didn't know how to respond, Malloy quickly said from the side, "We still have a few veto tokens. After the exam, we'll have someone send them to you. What do you think?" However, the girl shook her head. She said in a playful tone, "The veto tokens are easy to obtain. I don't care about them at all. I saved his life, so according to the rules, his life counts as mine. So he's my man, right?" When these words came out from the innocent girl's mouth, everyone was stunned. Zen was also speechless. With his strength, he was brave enough to fight most opponents. However, he was useless against such twisted logic. To save a warrior's life was definitely a huge favor. However, it didn't mean that the life that was saved belonged to the savior. This was the first time that this girl had left the floating island. As such, she was originally very clueless about worldly affairs. Bruce followed and took care of her along the way, and she hadn't caused any trouble. As Bruce didn't enter the Heavenly Han house, the girl became alone. With an innocent look on her face, she had begun to cause trouble. Chapter 1783, Malloy's Worries. Neither Zen nor Malloy took the girl's words seriously. Those who heard it were dumbfounded at first, but they had soon dismissed her words as mere nonsense. Maybe it was just a playful prank by the mysterious girl. However, Malloy did not dare to offend the girl in the slightest. As such, he wanted to change the topic of the conversation. With a mischievous laugh, he said, "I wonder which branch of the Han clan you are from." The Han clan on the floating island had a total of 3 main branches, which were the spiritual branch, heaven branch, and earth branch. Those 3 branches were the core strength of the Han clan. Additionally, the 3 of them together controlled the affairs in the floating island. When she heard Malloy's question, the girl looked confused. "Which branch? I don't know either." "You don't know?" Malloy's face froze, while the other true gods also revealed looks of surprise. Their faces were again painted with confusion. Even people like them, who came from the sub-branches of the Han clan, were very familiar with the 3 main branches on the floating island. If the girl in front of them really came from the floating island, how could she not know? Could they have guessed wrongly? Maybe the girl was from another place. Malloy thought for a moment. Afterward, he decided to change his method PF query. "Since you don't know which branch you are from, can you at least tell me your father's name?" he asked. "You want to know who my father is?" The green-clothed girl suddenly understood. With an innocent look on her face, she answered, "Why didn't you ask earlier?" "My father is..." Huff. However, before the girl could finish, a strong wind blew in from outside the Heavenly Han house. Along the wind were some particles similar to sand. In the blink of an eye, an old man appeared in the Heavenly Han house. Everyone in the courtyard was surprised yet again. "Grandpa Bruce," the girl smiled when she saw the old man. "Didn't you say you were going to wait for me outside?" Bruce looked at the girl and shook his head. Then, he turned to look at Malloy and asked coldly, "Are you the leader of the Heavenly Han house?" As a member of a sub-branch of the Han clan, don't you know that some questions cannot be randomly asked? As the old man bluntly questioned him, Malloy's expression was filled with dissatisfaction. Although he knew that the young lady was part of the Han clan, he didn't know which branch she was from and he needed to figure out. Nonetheless, he didn't want to offend the young lady. Just as he was about to open his mouth to explain, he saw the old man gently lift up the hem of his robe. A beautiful green sword hung on his waist. It was carved with emerald. The surface of the sword was full of hollows, and it was very exquisite. When Malloy saw the small green sword, his expression suddenly changed. His face was full of reverence. Then, he kneeled down on one knee as he cupped his fists. In a respectful tone, he said, "I'm Malloy Han, from the 13th sub-branch of the Han clan. Welcome to the Heavenly Han house." It wasn't just Malloy who suddenly became respectful. Seth, Zane and the other members of the Han clan also recognized the sword. They also dropped to one knee to kowtow to the old man. "I'm Zane Han, from the 9th sub-branch of the Han clan. Welcome to the Heavenly Han house." "I'm Seth Han, from the 3rd sub-branch of the Han clan. Welcome to the Heavenly Han house." All the disciples with the surname Han kneeled on the ground. Every one of them immediately showed respect to the old man who just arrived. As for those who were not from the Han clan, including the true gods and proving godly warriors, they were completely clueless as to what had happened. Zen faintly glanced at the small green sword. He thought that the recent changes in the attitude of those from the Han clan were most likely because of the small green sword and not because of the old man. His guess was not wrong. The sword indeed was the reason for their sudden respect. The Han clan's floating island was like a huge kingdom. Any disciples that came from the floating island would have a much higher status than the disciples of Han clan's sub-branches in the 6th Divine City. However, the disciples on the Han clan's floating island also had a huge difference in status. A hierarchy similar to a caste system was followed in the floating island. If the floating island was like a kingdom, then the Han clan's holy emperor was naturally the king. However, the presence of the holy emperor was well hidden. He would only appear once every tens of thousands of years. Even some of his relatives had barely seen him. Although some of the descendants of the Han clan had the blood of the holy emperor, they might not be able to meet the holy emperor for the rest of their lives. However, there were a few people from the Han clan who had the qualifications to see the holy emperor. Such people had extremely special statuses. Perhaps such people didn't have high positions in the Han clan, nor did they even take on any jobs. However, such people were not easily ignored. Their existences and statuses were extraordinary. Each of them had a small green sword on them. The small green sword on the old man meant that either the old man or the girl was someone close to the Holy Emperor. It was a symbol of status and evidence that they could meet the Holy Emperor. As such, the people from the Han clan did not salute the old man. Instead, their respect was targeted towards the little green sword that hung on the old man's waist. Bruce gave them a nod as a faint reply and didn't pay any more attention to them. He turned his head to look at his young lady. In a gentle yet firm tone, he said, "Miss, you've said that if your identity is revealed, you must go home with me. So don't." No, the girl didn't wait for Bruce's words to finish before she refused. A rebellious expression could be seen on her face. Bruce shook his head. "Miss, you have to keep your word." Although he was a servant, his tone was firm and there was no room for negotiation. A stern expression painted his face. The girl probably knew that she couldn't go against Bruce. Nonetheless, the pure eyes of hers fiercely stared at Zen. With a face on the verge of a tantrum, she pouted her mouth and said, "Then, bring this brat back with us. If I didn't use the veto token to save him, I wouldn't have been exposed." The eyes of the Han clan's disciples slightly flashed as they stared enviously at Zen. Deep in their hearts, everyone was jealous of how lucky Zen was. After all, those two were from the Han clan's floating island, and entering the floating island was their lifelong goal. If Zen could really go to the floating island with the girl, then it would be having a skyrocketing rise. When Malloy and the other true gods heard the girl's words, they grew anxious. The exam of the heavenly Han house had yet to start, but Zen had already shown his talent. Malloy had placed a great amount of hope on him. If Zen really became a disciple of the Holy Emperor in the future, Malloy would benefit greatly. Furthermore, the status of the heavenly Han house would be maintained for the time being. However, if Zen entered the floating island without the accomplishment of the examination, he wouldn't be affiliated with the heavenly Han house. If the girl could really take Zen away with her, then it would be a disaster for the heavenly Han house. Before Bruce could speak, Malloy gathered up his courage. In a respectful tone, he said, "This person came to our heavenly Han house and should be accepted by us as a disciple. How could he be taken away so casually?" Bruce looked at Malloy with a meaningful look on his face. In a callous voice, he replied, "We have no interest in him, but he does have extraordinary talent. I hope to see him on the floating island one day." "Grandpa Bruce," the girl protested. A pout still lingered on her face. However, Bruce did not say anything. With a calm expression, he ignored the girl's tantrum. He reached out and a horsetail whisk appeared in his hand. With a gentle wave of the horsetail whisk, a cloud of dust suddenly appeared. Accompanied by gusts of wind, he and the girl disappeared from everyone's sight. After the two of them left, Malloy and the others finally let out a sigh of relief. The stiff muscles on their faces finally relaxed. When they looked at Zen again, Malloy felt slightly awkward. Malloy had long taken a fancy to Zen and was bound to accept him as a disciple of the heavenly Han house. Nonetheless, Zen still needed to participate in the entire process of the exam. Without the completion of the process, Zen wouldn't be properly affiliated with the heavenly Han house. However, just now, when he argued with the girl, his intentions were revealed without a doubt. It was as if Malloy had already cut off Zen's path to the floating island, and he was afraid that Zen would blame him. "Well, Thad, if you join the heavenly Han house, then in a few years, you'll be able to go to the Han clan's floating island with your talent," Malloy explained in a polite tone. When he saw that Malloy, a mid-rank true god, politely explained the situation to him, Zen also sighed in his heart. The divine land and the evolutionary universe might be completely different in terms of the rules, but they were almost the same in terms of worldly experience. "Sir, I am indeed heading for the floating island, but my own path has been planned out long ago. Entering the heavenly Han house is a necessary step. There are some shortcuts in this world, but I am not willing to take any of them," Zen said with a smile. A gentle expression could be seen in his face. Malloy's eyes lit up at Zen's words, and he could not help but nod in praise. "Good ambition. With this kind of mentality, there shouldn't be anything difficult for you in this world." Malloy's words were sincere flattery. However, the others took it a bit differently. That was a chance to enter the floating island. Everyone in the yard wanted to go to that place. If Malloy didn't stop him, then Zen would truly be able to go to the floating island. The 100,000 proving godly warriors present could only wish in their nights of sleep about such a thing. None of them would be able to enter the floating island in their lifetime. However, Zen was just only a step away from that dream. "I think this brat was just saying this to conceal his regret. I agree with you. After losing this opportunity, he wants to go to the floating island on his own. In his dreams." There are so many geniuses in the Han clan every year. Furthermore, they are much stronger than normal, proving godly warriors. The Han clan's floating island has rejected many talented warriors, including those from the sub-branches of the Han clan. Yet Thad Luo wants to enter the floating island by himself. Not taking shortcuts. What nonsense. He is merely bluffing. These people stood in different positions, and their thoughts were naturally different. Of course, they could not understand Zen. It would be difficult for those warriors to reach certain heights in their entire lives. Naturally, they would not be able to see the wider world. Chapter 1784, Devon Tai. The air above the heavenly Han house glittered with the white jade tokens everyone had thrown up to the sky, all of them arranged in order. After that, the old man with the surname of Chen walked out as a roll of yellow paper materialized in his hands. He opened the yellow paper and pointed it up towards the sky above heavenly Han house. Then, he narrowed his lips and blew lightly. The white jade tokens above the heavenly Han house glowed a bright cyan. Each time a white jade token flickered, a name appeared on the yellow paper together with the place the person was from. The first white jade token that glowed belonged to Zane, and his name appeared on the yellow paper. On the other hand, the rest of the others' names appeared one by one in order according to their token's height. Not long after, the roll of yellow paper had finished recording the 100,000 proving godly warriors' names and the places they came from. As for Zen, his name would not appear on the yellow paper because he didn't throw a white jade token but a short halberd. But of course, the old man surnamed Chen obviously wouldn't neglect Zen. He took out an ink brush and lightly shook it, and then a small stream of ink flowed out from the brush tip. A few words were formed on the yellow paper, namely, Thad Luo, Misty Mountain Village, Vast Sky Region. Zen's name naturally ranked first, so it appeared before Zane's name. Although it made Zane internally unhappy, he had to accept the fact that Zen had easily thrown the black halberd to a height of 990 feet. Just like Seth had said, the descendants of the Han clan sub-branches were already born with a huge advantage. It didn't matter when it came to their bloodline or talent since they were all far stronger than ordinary warriors. Once they stepped into the godly way and became true gods, they would be far more powerful than ordinary true gods. However, the Han clan also needed to strengthen their position because a closed wealthy clan would be eliminated anytime soon. In the past, some of the rich clans on the floating islands were completely isolated from the outside world. The clan's disciples were prohibited from marrying outsiders, and outsiders weren't allowed to hold important positions. There were consequences for those various methods of isolations, which didn't manifest themselves until 10 or so divine eras later. Those consequences included the decrease of the rich clans, rankings, and some floating islands had even fallen into the time sea. Currently, the rich clans on the floating islands were quite nice to the outsiders. They also treated the outsiders they invited to work for the clans equally in many aspects. After the old man with the surname of Chen had organized the list, he left with the yellow paper. The leader of the heavenly Han house, Malloy, took down the black halberd and returned it to Zen before he turned to everyone in the heavenly Han house and announced, "Everyone, wait for another hour. After 1 hour, please move to the consulting god hall in the inner yard of the heavenly Han house." Once he was done, he left as well. The test of the heavenly Han house required him to prepare many things, so he didn't have much time to spare. When Master Wu saw that Zen had nothing left to do, he approached the young warrior. "You have imparted the mystical method for breaking the 2 taboos to me. I would like to know if you were the one who created this skill, or if someone else has taught you," he said with a chuckle. The true gods thought that Zen's talent really could compare with those of the elites of the floating islands. Although Bruce didn't take Zen away, he left them with some rather meaningful words. In any case, he should have already known that Zen was qualified to enter the floating island. On the other hand, Master Wu thought that such a talent like Zen really did have the ability to comprehend and create such an ingenious cultivation method. It was true that Master Evil had originally taught Zen the mystical method for breaking the 2 taboos. It was why Zen was unwilling to accept such a contribution and shook his head in response. "It was indeed taught to me by a master. I wonder what kind of person this master is. To be able to train such a remarkable disciple like you, he must have a consummate cultivation base," Master Wu said with a sigh. "Consummate," Zen whispered in slight surprise. At the same time, Master Evil laughed complacently in his mind. "Ha ha, I am fortunate enough to be seen as a master at the consummate stage. It is worth it to teach him the mystical method for breaking the 2 taboos," Master Evil uttered with a smile. It was known that a true god's cultivation base could be consummate, which meant that they could be qualified to become a holy being, but only when they had reached this stage. However, this old man seems like he wants to get something out of you and figure out who is the master you have mentioned. Ha ha, Master Evil added as a reminder. What Master Evil said couldn't be wrong, as Zen could also tell that Master Wu looked quite interested in the master that he had mentioned. Many masters had taught Zen, such as Mike, Bromley, Holy J, and Holy Drew. Yet due to their delicate identities, Zen couldn't possibly reveal anything. As expected, Master Wu asked a few more questions about that master's characteristics and so on. Zen did not immediately reject him, but instead falsely described the master's appearance and personality. This caused Master Wu to be lost in his thoughts in attempt to figure out that non-existent master. Everything seemed to happen in a blur, as an hour had passed in just a blink of an eye. The old man with the surname of Chen returned and announced to the crowd, "Everyone, please follow me to the backyard of the Heavenly Han house." The tapping of his shoes against the floor got increasingly softer as he turned around and left. Soon enough, the proving godly warriors moved towards the backyard of Heavenly Han house under the guidance of the true gods. The interiors of the Heavenly Han house were quite spacious, and everything was arranged in a neat and orderly manner. One by one, the 100,000 proving godly warriors filed inside in order. Zen walked slowly along with the crowd, and on his way, a few other proving godly warriors approached and tried to make friends with him. Many of them came from powerful and influential clans who, after they had realized Zen's value, naturally understood the importance of befriending him. They believed that if Zen could enter the floating island and return back, he would have a much greater influence in the future. Meanwhile, Zen gave simple responses to those warriors' friendly remarks. He thought that he would not stay in the six-burden divine city for long anyway. This time, Zen heard a low voice from a proving godly warrior who had approached him next. Thad Luo. Zen turned around and saw a young man in his early 20s. His body was quite sturdy, but his face looked a bit awkward. "You are." A confused look crossed Zen's face. He didn't know this person. "My surname is Tai and my first name is Devon," the young man replied with a smile. "Are you from the Tai clan?" Zen asked with raised brows. Devon Tai quickly nodded his head and said, "My sister sold the mud to you that day, but she didn't intentionally deceive you. After the test of the Heavenly Han house, I will personally ask her to return some of the divine might coins to you." This Devon Tai possessed a good talent and strength. He had been one of the top warriors among the 3 generations of the Tai clan, but he was still ranked in the top 50 on the list. Before he took the Heavenly Han house's test, he had heard that Lin had sold a piece of mud for an outrageous price. As he was to take part in the test, he clearly had to pay attention to the rankings. Now, he felt embarrassed by what Lin had done to Zen. While Lin was an eloquent lady, she definitely did not do a good thing when she sold a piece of mud to Zen for 500 divine might coins. Then again, 500 divine might coins was still a huge sum of money for the Tai clan. Even if Devon Tai wanted to return all of them, he didn't know if his clan members would agree or not. Therefore, he ended up saying that he would return a part of the coins to Zen, even if he didn't know how many coins yet. On the contrary, Zen was not concerned about a mere 500 divine might coins. Even though Master Evil had said that the divine might coin was still greatly useful, Zen currently did not care about it. After he had spent so many divine might coins and condensed a crystal, he figured out his method of condensing the godly tile. Therefore, he thought that the mud which cost him 500 coins was worth buying. "There's no need to return the coins to me," Zen said flatly. Anxiety quickly flooded Devon Tai's mind when Zen had refused. "This must be. No need, but I want you to help me," Zen continued. He had originally planned to find Lin from the Tai clan after the test in the Heavenly Han house, but now he didn't need to look for her. Her brother seemed to be much more generous, and this was a good opportunity to ask him for help. "You want me to help you?" Devon Tai asked in shock. He couldn't believe what he heard. Zen nodded and said in a serious tone, "I wonder where did you dig out that piece of mud? Can you take me there after the Heavenly Han house's test is over?" That mud. Devon Tai's eyes quickly lit up. He remembered that Alfred had always said that the mud was good, but he thought it was nothing special. Yet from Zen's words, he was sure that he was looking for that same piece of mud. What could it be possibly for? Chapter 1785, Consulting God Hall. In the Divine Land, people had a deep understanding on all sorts of materials and their functions. For example, everyone knew that the cheapest Coleoptrata winter grass was used to make an excellent base for pills because its lower portion could be made into a gelatinous substance which could be fused with the majority of materials. Therefore, though this material could be found almost anywhere, it was something even high-ranked pills would need. In contrast, the most expensive materials were priced so impossibly high that most people couldn't find themselves possessing them. The winged dragon horn, for example, could enable the activation of illusions of remote ages, and by transcending time, warriors could attain the highest level of comprehension when they wanted. The usage of all sorts of strange materials and substances had been thoroughly studied over countless divine eras. Aside from particular forbidden areas that very few people explored, there weren't many secrets within the divine land. However, there was nothing special about the mud dug out by the Thai clan aside from having a trace of spirit. After studying it several times, they landed on this same conclusion. In the end, Devon's uncles gave up on trying to prove its worth. Hearing Thad ask about it puzzled him even more. It seemed that the substance was of greater use than they expected. Not knowing why, Devon agreed to Zen because it seemed like he really needed it. He was quite easily swayed, but if his sister, Lin, were here, she would have extorted a huge amount of divine might coins from Zen. As the two conversed, they followed the throng of people and entered the backyard of the Heavenly Han house. The backyard was a wide field with a building at the center. For some odd reason, the building was half buried into the ground. It resembled much of a wide well bay, but the entrance was found on the front. Wisps of black smoke emerged from the dark entrance of the half-buried structure. Zen's nose twitched slightly as he realized someone was burning incense in this building. Once all of the proving godly warriors gathered at the backyard, a man came out from the entrance. It was the master of the Heavenly Han house Malloy, standing before them with a huge smile across his face. "I believe that it's not the first time that many of you have taken the test in our Heavenly Han house," he said. "And you all already knew a lot about the consulting God Hall of our Heavenly Han house. However, I still wish to reiterate the rules within." Amongst the proving godly warriors that took the test of the Heavenly Han house, quite a number of them had taken the test almost a dozen times. Those who failed continuously had grown to become familiar faces in the Heavenly Han house. However, there was always a portion of warriors who took the test for the first time. For this reason, the rules were constantly reiterated because of the dangers that awaited them. Zen had only been in the six-burden divine city for a short period of time. Although he had already done a portion of his own research, he knew he was not completely knowledgeable of everything he needed to know. He listened intently as the master of the Heavenly Han house discussed the rules. This consulting God Hall was built by the Holy Emperor of Han clan. It's been 23 divine eras since it was built. As you might have noticed, the consulting God Hall has sunk 10 feet into the ground. Malloy went on to say that the consulting God Hall had a very long, intricate history. In the past, the Han clan did not have a holy being. But at that time, the Holy Emperor of the Han clan had already stepped into the consummation level of true gods, and the Han clan was at the top among second-tier clans. There were a total of over 300 godly way tablets in the consulting God Hall, making up of 10% of the godly way tablets in the divine land. Of course, all these godly way tablets in the consulting God Hall were only imitations. Imitating godly way tablets was not as simple as it seemed. Even if it were a true god who got too close to the godly way tablets, they were subject to a lot of harm and injury. Although the internal momentum contained in the imitations of godly way tablets could not compare to that of the genuine godly way tablets, they could still test the talent of proving godly warriors. In this way, at least they could tell which godly way was suitable for a martial artist to cultivate. At that time, with Han clan's strength, creating such a consulting God Hall was definitely a challenging task. Each of the godly way tablets had been carefully polished and prepped by the top-ranked true gods of the Han clan. Moreover, the godly way tablets also contained those top-ranked true gods' comprehension of the godly ways for good measure. Naturally, the current Han clan didn't need the consulting God Hall at all. This consulting God Hall was then left to the Han clan sub-branches, and in turn, placed under the control of the magnificent Heavenly Han house. These imitated godly way tablets have existed for far too long and their internal momentums have undergone slight changes, Malloy warned. If you can't withstand the pressure of the internal momentum, by all means, please don't force yourself. In the past, there were always a few who forced themselves to endure it. As a result, their cultivation reduced and in the more serious cases, some died on the spot. We Heavenly Han house will take no responsibility if any incident happens, he spoke with a calm, firm tone. Considering the past events, it was necessary for him to make everyone knowledgeable of the risks. Many proving godly warriors dreamed of becoming members of the Heavenly Han house as they carried the hopes of the elders of their clans. But to some extent, some of them were unable to comprehend the internal momentum in the godly way tablets and were even less likely to obtain their acknowledgements. Nonetheless, they gritted their teeth and pushed themselves as far as they could go. Eventually, their souls were shattered by the internal momentum for good. Some of the masters of the second-tier and third-tier clans were so depressed for their warrior's death that they personally went to Heavenly Han House. Although these clans dared not offend the Han clan, it still caused chaos throughout the city and brought the Heavenly Han House into disrepute. Now, before entering the Consulting God Hall, Malloy, as the master of the Heavenly Han House, had the responsibility to warn these warriors so that they would know when enough was enough. They also had to know that if there were any casualties, the Heavenly Han House would not be held responsible. This had to be ingrained in their minds to make sure they knew what they were doing. After Malloy finished speaking, he turned to Zen. According to the rules of the Heavenly Han House, the top-ranked warrior will be given priority to enter first. Thad, if you would please. As he spoke, Malloy gestured for him to enter. Zen nodded and stepped into the Consulting God Hall. After Zen entered the hall, the place immediately darkened and the fragrance of incense grew so powerful that it stung his nostrils. "This is the soul awakening fragrance," said a voice. It was the voice of Master Evil. "What's the use of it?" Zen asked. Master Evil chuckled. "The Heavenly Han House has spent a lot on the test this time. The soul awakening fragrance is no cheap item. It can make a person's soul more sensitive and they would become more sensitive to the internal momentum. If I recall correctly, the Heavenly Han House wasn't this generous in the past." Master Evil had never taken a test of the Heavenly Han House. When he was qualified to roam around the vast sky region, he was already a low-rank true god. But the way Master Evil achieved everything was through his own exploration and trials in the Divine Land, which was different from the typical way the true gods of wealthy and influential clans residing on the floating islands had relied on to gain their titles. Some warriors from these clans were also sent to the outside to cultivate and grow by themselves, something recognized as free-range cultivation. With that being said, Master Evil was right in his judgment and the Han clan sub-branches were very, very anxious. After all, it had been quite some time since an outstanding genius had appeared in the Heavenly Han House. The 16 elites who were recommended to the floating island of Han clan last time were all rejected, and the leaders of the Han clan sub-branches were also mocked by them throughout the process. The soul awakening fragrance could increase a martial artist's comprehension for a short period of time, also considered a type of auxiliary method. The Han clan sub-branches wanted to find a group of elites who would gain the recognition of the main Han clan immediately. It actually has such an effect. Zen sniffed through the air as the strong fragrance of incense entered his nose. But for some reason, Zen didn't feel any effects on himself. All he could feel was a slight cooling sensation going through his mind, but it eventually disappeared as if it was never there to begin with. This soul awakening fragrance has a miraculous effect on Jasper fighting souls, but only a slight effect on silver fighting souls. However, its effect on gold fighting souls is almost negligible. So considering your soul level, it is obviously useless on you. Master Evil shook his head and flaunted a mischievous smile. This made sense. The soul cultivation levels of the proving godly warriors outside were extremely weak. So for sure, if the soul awakening fragrance had the miraculous effect of enhancing one's comprehension, it would probably have an outstanding effect on them. Zen was the first to enter the Consulting God Hall, and now the soul awakening fragrance was at its strongest dose. However, as 100,000 warriors gradually entered into the Consulting God Hall, the soul awakening fragrance was being slowly absorbed by the crowd. Zen's perk as the top in the ranks was to absorb it purely, but it went to waste as it had no effect on him whatsoever. He had only taken a few steps when the sound of hurried footsteps came up from behind him. It was the warrior who was ranked second, Zane. After Zane entered the Consulting God Hall, he sniffed greedily as if he was going to suck in all the soul awakening fragrance in one inhale. All of a sudden, he caught a glimpse of Zen looking back at him and his eyes immediately darkened in expression. However, now that he had absorbed the soul awakening fragrance, his mind was instantly cleared. He instantly thought about Seth's warning, and the fierce light in his eyes flashed and disappeared. However, he had a distaste for Zen that was a little too obvious. He nodded faintly towards Zen and even whispered lowly, "Those at the top of the rankings can take the best spots. You'd better remember that." With that, he walked past Zen and disappeared into the depths of the hall without another word. Zen only smiled in response. He slowly made his way towards the depths of the Consulting God Hall. Chapter 1786, Imitated Godly Way Tablets. The moment Zen took a few steps forward, he suddenly heard a set of loud footsteps behind him. It was Seth, who was ranked third. The third placer's face was full of doubt as he scanned Zen's calm face, despite Zane being ahead of him. When he passed by Zen, both of them looked at each other. He smiled politely at Zen and then quickly left. He was known as a steady and sensible man. He didn't have much of an opinion on Zen, but he knew not to provoke the other warrior. At the very least, he had to act courteous even on just the surface. Furthermore, they had to rely on only themselves in the consulting god hall. It was also why he didn't need to remind Zen the way Zane did. After all of the warriors entered the consulting god hall, they were led to a small downward slope. Zen moved neither fast nor slow, so other proving godly warriors who were ranked a bit lower than him surpassed him one by one. Those proving godly warriors were the elites of the great clans, but they didn't dare to offend Zen either when they passed by him. They secretly mocked Zen and his slow, leisurely pace in their minds, but they didn't say anything. They thought that he had wasted his advantage, even though he had won first place. The Heavenly Han House has inherited the Han clan's heritage, so it is impossible to even underestimate it. Sadly, it's a pity that because the Han clan doesn't manage its sub-branches well, they haven't accomplished anything in years, Master Evil lamented while Zen looked around the consulting god hall. The hall had been built a long time ago, but the carvings on the walls were still as impressive as ever. They were grand and majestic, decorated with all kinds of legends. There were patterns of the immortal birds constructing a rainbow bridge, and the creating axe used to separate the heaven from earth. When someone of the Han clan becomes a holy being, they will surely transfer all the outstanding warriors of their family to the floating island, and only the sub-branches will be left. What can the sub-branches accomplish then? Zen asked curiously. The Han clan doesn't care about its sub-branches. I've once traveled to the ancestral lands of other great clans in the Divine Land, and found that they're in a much better situation than the Han clan. Generally speaking, some of the ancestral lands were still under the care of their clans. In some cases, with the accumulations of ancestral lands, their members could become holy beings. However, the Han clan didn't think the same. They looked down on the proving godly warriors who took part in the test of the Heavenly Han House, and even Master Evil. Look at how the owner of the Heavenly Han House treats you, Master Evil continued. You're like a life-saving straw to him. It looks like it won't be long. They won't even wait until you master the godly way before they hurriedly recommend you to the floating island, he added. Although Master Evil hadn't actually spoken much, he had thoroughly observed the people outside from Zen's mind. The two of them chatted as they walked down the long slope all the way to the bottom. It was still pitch black in the distance, and only a few glimmers that barely pointed out the path floated around. However, there was a horizontal line that was outlined by a row of cyan bricks in the middle of the path. When Zen crossed the bricks, he felt a very complex aura rush towards him from all directions. This is a vibe, and also the internal momentum, Zen muttered. The corners of his eyes twitched in realization. Momentum was a description of a true god's ability to summon the faith energy within their inner world. On the other hand, one's comprehension of it was called the internal momentum. For instance, Zen had created a large sword cloud from that patch of mud. The momentum contained within that sword cloud could be called internal momentum. It was known that in the Divine Land, the godly tablets that recorded the godly ways boasted of the purest internal momentum. However, the godly way tablets in the consulting god hall were created by the Han clan. Therefore, Zen didn't take what Malloy said seriously since all of the godly way tablets in the consulting god halls were imitations. The internal momentum of the imitations, which the warriors had comprehended, was slightly different from that of the original godly way tablets. It was clearly much more inferior. Yet after Zen crossed the line and was bathed in the momentum, the sliver of contempt he had originally harbored disappeared without a trace. It was no accident that the Han clan would have a holy being. This was the accumulation that a great clan should have. Moreover, they had accumulated a lot more, so they should even have a second or a third holy being. Unfortunately, the Han clan's sub-branches did not have any holy beings. What was worse was that in the last few thousand years, the sub-branches never contributed even a single disciple for Holy Emperor. That was the reason why Master Evil felt that the Han clan's sub-branches had declined. The internal momentum that had been placed on Zen's body was extremely complicated, as it was an aura formed from many kinds of internal momentum. The momentum grew increasingly stronger as Zen progressed. However, it didn't obstruct him too much and he was able to maintain a pace that was neither too fast, nor too slow. Meanwhile, many more proving godly warriors had surpassed him. When they saw how slow Zen walked, they all thought that Zen's soul was so weak that he couldn't resist the momentum. Some of them even showed off to him by obviously quickening their paces. Of course, Zen understood what they thought. His faint smile remained on his face. The test of the Heavenly Han House was tough, as seen in the competitiveness among the contestants, who all did their best in hopes of gaining the favor of the heavenly Han house. However, Zen was no longer on the same level as them, and what they fought over meant nothing to him. After about 5 minutes, the momentum had increased tenfold from before. Then, a huge hall appeared in front of Zen. It was the real Consulting God Hall. Gigantic godly way tablets which had faint words that flowed on them lined the ground. Each of them emitted varying degrees of radiance and luster. They also had unique appearances and forms of words. Some of them were like grass serpents that coiled around, while others were carved by nicking and pitching tools. It was clear that those godly way tablets weren't created by the same person. Underneath each of the godly way tablets was a narrow flight of stairs that was paved like a small mountain slope. Shadows from the huge, towering godly way tablets shaded the tight path. Although Zen had seen many strange things in his life, he was still quite shocked when he saw the scene in front of him. It's truly amazing to see imitated godly way tablets. I wonder what a true one is like, Zen said as his eyes lit up. Ever since he entered the divine land, he had yet to personally see a true godly way tablet. He continued his slow pace as he moved forward in the place. All the proving godly warriors who had surpassed him now walked slower. Some of them were drenched in sweat as white fog came out of their heads. They were already considered as outstanding warriors in the heavenly Han house. About 100 proving godly warriors had just surpassed Zen, and they were among the top 100. However, they still found it difficult to resist the internal momentum despite being only a small distance away from the godly way tablets. Only Zen seemed to stroll leisurely in his courtyard. His lips were still curved up in a smile as he passed the proving godly warriors. Those who had mocked him before now understood that it wasn't that he couldn't walk fast, but he simply did not want to compete with them. According to Malloy, there were a total of 327 imitations of godly way tablets in the Consulting God Hall. Now, the godly way tablets were constructed in their current location not to allow them to comprehend the internal momentum contained within them. Many proving godly warriors had observed the godly way tablets for 100 years, but might not be able to comprehend the internal momentum. Therefore, any proving godly warrior who was acknowledged by the imitations of godly way tablets could join the heavenly Han house. Such a request seemed simple, but only a few people could actually do it. A maximum of 20 people succeeded every year. The heavenly Han house had conducted a big test this year, so it might be more than 20 people, but it was not expected to exceed 30. This is the tablet of the 5 elements godly way, Zen said. He stepped forward and looked up at the first godly way tablet in awe. Just as he looked at it, he felt a strong sense of internal momentum of 5 elements from the tablet. The 5 elements godly way was one of the most widely cultivated godly ways in the divine land. Many proving godly warriors had already begun to climb up the stairs, and the higher they climbed, the stronger the pressure of internal momentum they faced. Currently, there were more than a dozen warriors on the stairs. All of them climbed upwards slowly and silently in order to obtain a better position. However, the quietness was disturbed when someone shouted, "Get out of my way." The voice came from a warrior who pushed another warrior in his way. The steps were extremely narrow and could only accommodate one person. When everyone had reached their limits, they all had to fight for the same position. Thus, it was no surprise when a dispute arose. When Zen saw the scene, he only shook his head and continued to walk forward. He wasn't too interested in the 5 elements godly way. Besides, it wasn't easy to travel to the place, so he wanted to see the other godly way tablets. Chapter 1787, Purple Aura Godly Way. The godly way tablets in the Consulting God Hall were arranged in an equidistant manner. The closer one was to the godly way tablets, the greater the impact they felt from the internal momentum. They were also able to communicate with the tablets better. Getting too close was a problem though. The internal momentum could get too much and injure the person. Proving godly warriors were vigilant in maintaining a safe, proper distance to these things to make sure that the internal momentum was within the limit that they could handle. Most of the proving godly warriors' souls were at the same level, but the steps in front of the godly way tablets were narrow and the space was quite limited. Thus, the good spots were usually already taken by those who had come earlier, while those who came later could only take the places that were further to the godly way tablets. Zen followed the winding road, passing through several godly way tablets and seeing a few other proving godly warriors gathered on the steps before those tablets. The proving godly warrior named Zane stood in front of the 6th godly way tablet on the right. The words on the tablet emitted a faint blue light and radiated a sharp chill. The chill didn't seem overwhelming, but Zane, who stood beneath the tablet, looked pale. He shivered with his teeth practically chattering as a layer of white frost engulfed his body. Snow godly way. Zen shook his head. This wasn't the godly way he was looking for. He cultivated the emotion-closing godly way, but since that was classified as forbidden within the divine land, then he figured that it might be difficult to find it within the consulting god hall. In fact, the number of godly ways here only took up around 10% of the 3,000 godly ways in the divine land. However, since he was already here, Zen figured that he might as well broaden his horizons. He wanted to see just how profound the internal momentum that the top-level true gods comprehended was. The deeper into the consulting god hall he went, the fewer proving godly warriors he saw. Godly way tablets placed near the entrance were the ones that most people cultivated. The deeper one went, the more obscure the godly ways were. These were usually the ones that were of the same power as other godly ways but more difficult to comprehend, thus leading to their unpopularity. Not long after, Zen finally found himself in front of a godly way tablet. This tablet emitted a strange, purple mist that transformed into various, unique shapes. Horses galloped around the tablet, eagles screeched and flew, and purple sword images constantly evolved into a myriad of sword arrays. Zen's brow furrowed at the sight. This aura, he was very familiar with it. It was the very same aura Margaret released when she operated the sword arrays. Back in the evolutionary universe, the only technique Margaret seemed to know was how to control sword arrays, which was already an innate ability of her purple power body. It was worth noting though that the purple power world was an independent world, merely controlling sword arrays was just scratching the surface of what a purple power body could do. Yan also possessed the purple power body, but this should have been bestowed upon her by their father. Zen briefly wondered whether she had comprehended any godly way in the divine land. If she had, was the godly way Zen currently stared at the one she comprehended? Zen was intrigued by this godly way tablet and chose to climb up the stairs. The moment he set his foot on one of the steps, the internal momentum that emanated from the other godly way tablets was suddenly repelled by the internal momentum of this single purple godly way tablet, sweeping through Zen and all that surrounded him. He was around 20 steps up when a woman in white suddenly appeared in front of him. This woman was an elite disciple of some third-tier clan. He had already met her before and figured she was ranked at around 40 since there were over 40 warriors who walked past him before her earlier. She gave Zen a faint smile when she passed by him. The girl exuded a shyness that added to her charm. This is the Grand Purple Aura technique, also known as the Purple Aura Godly Way. Women are usually the only ones who can cultivate it as it requires a special physique, the woman in white said, a bit surprised to see Zen walk over to her. Purple Aura Godly Way Grand Purple Aura technique, he repeated with a nod. He continued climbing up until he reached the place where the woman was. Do you still want to go up? There was a surprised look on the woman's face, not really understanding what Zen was doing. The internal momentum on this godly way tablet was not something he could comprehend. The young man shrugged. I just want to have a look. May I pass? Still unclear of his intentions, the woman stood up and moved to the side, allowing Zen to walk past her. The internal momentum of the Purple Aura Godly Way is relatively mild, but don't mistake that for weakness. If you get too close, the internal momentum will attack you, she told him, pointing at the purple mist that materialized from the tablet. Upon closer look, Zen could more clearly make out the things the purple mist materialized into: a lion, a wolf, even a palace, and everything that one could imagine. Zen nodded in understanding. Thank you for informing me. I still want to see it a bit more clearly. The woman made way for him and Zen lightly tapped his toes and climbed up the stairs. Just as he steadied himself, he heard a loud rumble from behind him. Rumble. Both Zen and the white-robed woman looked behind them only to see that a nearby godly way tablet had started shaking. On top of this particular tablet was a snow-white light where hexagonal crystals, the size of a washbasin, constantly swayed. At that moment, the light shot towards the roof of the consulting god hall. It's the Snow Godly Way. Someone is acknowledged by the Snow Godly Way so soon, the woman remarked in such a gentle voice. However, there was a trace of envy in her eyes. She cultivated the Purple Aura Godly Way and naturally possessed the purple power body. Had she been born in the evolutionary universe, then she would have been a top warrior. Unfortunately, she was born in a third-tier clan in the Divine Land. Resources were limited along with her exposure to all sorts of martial arts. It's that guy called Zane, Zen murmured, staring at the bottom to see Zane enveloped by the snow-white light. Soon enough, Malloy's voice rang out. Zane of the Han clan has been acknowledged by the Snow Godly Way. It wasn't just the white-robed woman who was envious. Many of the proving godly warriors were also quite jealous of the fact that someone had already been acknowledged so quickly. Zane was originally ranked 5th, and during the previous test, the height his white jade token reached was only second to Zen's. His acknowledgement wasn't really that much of a surprise. Now that Zane had been acknowledged by the Godly Way tablet, then everyone wondered about that guy called Thad. Many of the warriors began to actively search for Zen and quickly discovered him up top. Why did that kid climb to the Godly Way tablet of the Purple Aura Godly Way? Isn't the Purple Aura Godly Way only cultivated by women? No, that's not completely right. There's also a couple of men who possess the purple power body, someone interjected. However, they're pretty rare. Most of them are eunuchs. The warriors were all bewildered. A person who possessed a purple power body emitted an aura different from ordinary warriors. The white-robed woman, for example, was the eldest daughter of the Shui clan of the Six Burden region. The Shui clan was only a third-tier clan, but Mei, the woman, had already managed to reach the 41st rank by relying on her special physique. However, the other warriors had already seen Zen and knew it was impossible for him to possess a purple power body. Zen wasn't quite aware of the attention his actions had gotten. There was quite a distance between each Godly Way tablet, so he didn't really hear what the other people were saying. Once the light from the Snow Godly Way disappeared, Zen shifted his gaze away and continued climbing up. Mei had previously tried to dissuade him from going up further, but she understood that he was someone far stronger than her. If he insisted on pushing forward, then she naturally wouldn't be able to stop him. As Zen continued to climb, he got ever closer to the Godly Way tablet. As he did so, the purple mist that lingered around the tablet began to stir and surge. Hoo! The auras churned and transformed into dozens of sharp sword shadows, forming an ingenious sword array that shot towards Zen. Be careful, Mei warned. She was well aware of Zen's power, but being cautious never hurt anyone. The number of geniuses who perished due to their arrogance was way too high. However, when the sword array came towards him, Zen didn't show any intention of dodging at all. Chapter 1788, Infinity Ruler. Ever since Zen stepped into the Divine City, he had been extremely cautious. Since the emotion-closing Godly Way was classified as a forbidden Godly Way, Zen wouldn't use it randomly, nor would he use it in the presence of a large crowd. When he had used his spiritual will to form a soul attack in the Brilliant Moon restaurant, Zen had also erased the sharp aura within his soul. It could only be called the enhanced version of the spiritual thorn. In the face of this sword array attack forming from the internal momentum, Zen did not dodge, he instead allowed the sword shadows to enter his mind. When these sword shadows gathered within his mind and formed into a sword array, the small golden swords on the surface of Zen's soul instantly radiated with boundless light. As the strands of golden light reverberated in his mind, they shattered all the sword shadows. The eyes were the windows to the soul. While the golden light of his soul flashed, Zen had already closed his eyes and covered it within his mind. When he opened his eyes again, everything had returned to normal. The scene left Mei flabbergasted. She thought that Zen had some sort of precious treasures that could protect his soul, letting him forego dodging. Judging from Zen's innate talent and performance, it was highly possible. Never did she expect Zen to lack such a thing. But instead, he allowed the sword array from the internal momentum's pressure to pierce his mind. Just as she worried about Zen taking mental damage, he had already regained his composure and had taken another step as if nothing even happened. No wonder the old man from the floating island thinks so highly of him, Mei murmured. As she thought about her own fate, she couldn't help but sigh. Zen didn't know Mei was so sentimental. As he continued climbing, the pressure from the internal momentum began turning into all sorts of things, disappearing into Zen's mind one by one. There were 9 floor purple pagodas, 10,000 giant swords, and a 2-headed serpent. The materialized purple mist had turned into everything, but no matter what shape it took, they were all materialized from the pressure of the internal momentum. Their power couldn't have been too far off from each other. As these things drilled into his mind, Zen couldn't help but close his eyes and kill them with his soul pressure once again. But there were simply too many of them. Waves after waves of attacks flowed into his mind, and Zen only shut his eyes tightly and used his spiritual sense to figure out his surroundings. He then continued to climb the stairs and quicken his pace. There were over 100 steps under each Godly Way tablets. Most proving godly warriors could only stay on the 50th to 60th steps, like Mei, who stood on the 52nd step. If she advanced, the pressure on her would multiply to a point she could no longer bear. But with Zen's rapid climbing, he had already reached the 90th step. Does the guy want to climb to the top? In theory, the closer you are to the Godly Way tablet, the easier it is to communicate with it. But the pressure is too great up there. How would you even comprehend it under such great pressure? You're mistaken. Let me remind you again, he's a man. he can't cultivate the purple aura godly way. Quote. For a time, many proving godly warriors couldn't focus on comprehending the godly way tablets and instead wasted their attention on Zen. They all wanted to know just what the guy was trying to accomplish. Under the crowd's watchful eyes, Zen rushed up to the stage on the top floor. The moment he stood on the stage, the purple aura on the godly way tablet became increasingly restless, flooding in like a tide. There was no time for it to form into something before entering Zen's mind. It was as if his head had turned into a black hole, the purple aura was pouring in continuously. After a long while, it was probably because the internal momentum on the godly way tablet had been consumed too much. The internal momentum finally calmed down, ceasing its surge towards Zen. Instead, it continued to slowly circulate the godly way tablet's surface, no longer posing any threat. Only then did Zen open his eyes and look at the godly way tablet in silence. The grand purple aura technique can transform the purple aura into an auspicious place and create a world of its own. There are 3 types of this operation among all living things. It is the development of the natural laws. It may not defy the divine will in it. Beautiful were the purple characters recorded on the godly way tablet. A woman must have created the godly way tablet. Zen began to understand the theurgy of the grand purple aura technique after his observations. It was, in fact, another manifestation of life vitality. But it had inherited some of the chaotic energy's abilities, such as creating a new world. The purple power world in the evolutionary universe was isolated, its rules were completely different from those of other supreme worlds. Back then, it was created by a true god who had cultivated the grand purple aura technique. The world constructed from it was different from the inner world. Cultivating the deep part of the technique allowed one to open up a new world within the divine land. Although this world could not be compared to the universe, it was still stronger than the ordinary inner world. So when a true god cultivated the grand purple aura technique to its peak, they could, in turn, be called a demi-holy being. But the control this technique required was most profound. True gods who cultivated this godly way specialized most in sword arrays, so Margaret learned how to arrange sword arrays in the purple power world. Although Yan's purple power body was bestowed upon her by Father, I wonder if she managed to cultivate the grand purple aura technique or step into the other godly way. I wonder if Father has any other plans for this. Even now, Zen's father's plans were still shrouded in layers of clouds. He didn't know what sort of considerations Mike had in mind, and clearly, Mike didn't want him to uncover the reasons. He just put Murphy, a great holy being, in front of him. While Zen was deep in thought, a fluctuation suddenly came to his mind. The infinity ruler in the depths of his mind began spinning slowly. Then, a ghostly light began flickering from one end of the infinity ruler before moving about on the scales packed densely on it. Finally, it stopped on a scale right in the middle. Boom! The moment the light stopped on the scale, a blazing light burst out like flames. It was as if the sun had burned itself out to its limit, leaving behind a trace of brilliance. What is that? In Zen's mind, Master Evil was so shocked at the scene. Being in Zen's head, he had already discovered the green jade ruler. Even though Master Evil was experienced and knowledgeable, he did not know where the ruler came from. But Master Evil was tactful enough not to question Zen about it. He was just not expecting this jade ruler to explode with such force at that moment. A blazing radiance burst out, shining from Zen's eyes. His black pupils seemed to be on fire as a ring of blazing light formed around the edges of his orbs, dazzling brightly. Without a clue of what had happened, Zen looked completely astonished. But after the change in his eyes, the godly way tablet he saw was then completely different. The words on its surface changed. They began twisting and distorting as the purple light condensed from the internal momentum began fluctuating frantically. Ah, what's going on? Standing on the stairs, May was surprised at the scene. Although Zen's actions were strange, May was still working hard on her own comprehension. She was hurrying to comprehend the internal momentum on the godly way tablet, so she paid little attention to Zen. But now, Zen glared at the godly way tablet with blazing eyes, turning the internal momentum on it into a mess. May was no longer able to comprehend it. Though Zen didn't want to cause a huge commotion either, the seemingly calm and peaceful infinity ruler suddenly turned abnormal in front of the godly way tablet. At this time, it wasn't only the proving godly warriors who paid attention to Zen. Even the leader of the heavenly Han house and the other true gods were quietly watching him from a corner. Each and every one of their expressions read, "Wonderful. What kind of secrets does that have? That fellow's eyes. It seems to be the fire god eyes. They're definitely not the fire god eyes. Otherwise, how could he have messed up the internal momentum on the godly way tablet? The Grand Purple Aura Technique's Godly Way tablet was personally crafted by Joy Han. The internal momentum within is much deeper than the internal momentum of other Godly Way tablets. Joy was a true god at the consummation level. In addition to Han clan's holy emperor, there was also a demi-holy being called Joy in this clan. While the purple sky land she created wasn't as big as a universe, it had made her strength much greater than other true gods at the same level. But the internal momentum on the Godly Way tablet had already turned into a mess. The purple characters were showing signs of crumbling and the deepest comprehension hidden within the internal momentum had turned into a purple light before quietly entering Zen's eyes. Chapter 1789, Absorb. Two blazing circles continued to revolve within Zen's eyes. During this process, the previously disordered internal momentum began to settle within him and he felt a sense of enlightenment sink into the depths of his soul. At that moment, Zen felt as if he was able to see the true meaning of the Purple Aura Godly Way. Hiss. The Purple Aura Godly Way is not consummate because the woman who carved this Godly Way tablet did not cultivate it up to the consummate stage. Actually, even if she did reach the consummate level, displaying all of her comprehension on the tablet may not have been what she wanted. Zen judged in an instant. Each of the 3,000 godly ways was completely different. The Grand Purple Aura Technique could create a myriad of sword arrays and transform into several extremely powerful true spirits. Its final level meant it could transform into a purple sky land. However, the description for the purple sky land remained incomplete. If I want to gain complete enlightenment of the Grand Purple Aura Technique, I'll need to find a complete Godly Way tablet. I didn't expect that with this infinity ruler, I could actually see through the internal momentum and figure out the essence of the Grand Purple Aura Technique. Previously, he had been perplexed as to how to use the infinity ruler, but now, he was finally able to appreciate its extraordinary ability. Even if the treasures of the Divine Land were still a bit of a foreign concept to Zen, he knew very well that this infinity ruler was extraordinary. The light of the infinity ruler gradually dimmed down as it returned to its original state. However, it was slightly different from before. A small dot appeared on a scale in the middle of the ruler. Zen took a closer look and discovered a faint, purple light that flowed through the center of the dot, the essence of the internal momentum. This ruler has absorbed the Purple Aura Godly Way, he remarked in surprise. Zen once again examined the jade ruler, carefully counting the scales from beginning to end. He was able to get a number, 3,000 scales. In short, this jade ruler was meant to contain the 3,000 godly ways. Once the light disappeared, so did the two blazing rings in Zen's eyes. The internal momentum that Zen had initially disturbed became silent and orderly once again. Wanting to test his hypothesis quickly, the young man had no plans in staying there any longer. He immediately set out to leave, but, just as he turned his head, a dark purple pillar of light shot out from the top of the Godly Way tablet and headed straight for the ceiling of the Consulting God Hall. A purple halo enveloped Zen as the pillar of light reached him. The sight stunned all proving godly warriors present. Even Malloy and the Heavenly Han houses true gods who taught the godly ways. Were also surprised. Zen has been acknowledged by the Purple Aura Godly Way. Then that means he has the talent to cultivate the Purple Aura Godly Way. That's impossible. He clearly has never possessed the purple power body. It was understandable for the people to be confused. This scene they were currently witnessing completely exceeded their common sense. Mei stared at Zen with her mouth agape, not really understanding how he managed to be acknowledged by the Godly Way tablet. However, Zen knew that the one that had been acknowledged by the Godly Way tablet wasn't him but the Infinity Ruler. Outside the Consulting God Hall, Malloy and the true gods were at a complete loss as to what to do. What should we do? Should we declare that Zen is qualified? The old man surnamed Chen asked. Malloy had a strange and puzzled expression on his face. He is indeed qualified, but it's impossible. There's no way he could cultivate the Purple Aura Godly Way. That's not the worst part, another true god reminded. Malloy sighed. I have also thought of this. There were many warriors in the Divine Land who possessed the purple power body, but not many had the actual talent to practice this godly way. Moreover, the vast majority of them were women. Joy, as the demi-holy being of the Han clan, enjoyed high status and power, only second to the Holy Emperor of the Han clan. She could also recruit disciples, but her most basic requirement was being able to cultivate the Grand Purple Aura Technique. A warrior who was acknowledged by the Godly Way tablet of the Purple Aura Godly Way did not enter the Heavenly Han house but was given to Joy instead. Since these were the rules, the Heavenly Han house would not be given the chance to admit such warriors. Malloy had been afraid that the girl in green from the floating island would be the one to take Zen away. Now, it seemed another problem had arisen. If I knew this was going to happen, then I wouldn't have let him participate in the test, Malloy cursed to himself. The rules of the Heavenly Han House were strict, but it could always be circumvented for the right and worthy individual. Had he known that Zen was going to be acknowledged by the tablet of the purple or a godly way, he would have found a reason to exempt the test for the young man and admitted him directly. They had been extremely curious as to what godly way was suited for Zen and also wanted to observe his talent more clearly. None of them expected such a strange thing to happen. Keep this matter a secret, the old man surnamed Chen advised, his eyes flashing in determination. Hesitation was painted on the true gods' faces. Joy was someone who was definitely powerful in their eyes. The consequences of deceiving her would surely be hard to bear. However, Malloy nodded his head in agreement. I won't announce it. I'm not really sure what that is trying to do. Within the consulting god hall, the sight of Zen being acknowledged by the godly way tablet incited envious and also strange feelings among the proving godly warriors. Most of them were confused, especially with the fact that Zen had obviously been acknowledged, yet no announcement was heard from the Heavenly Han House. Zen wasn't willing to wait for Malloy to announce his acknowledgement. He was still very eager to test the Jade Ruler in his mind. Since the Jade Ruler had been able to absorb the purple or a godly way, then it should, in theory, be able to take in the other godly ways as well. The godly way tablets around them were mere fakes created by true gods, but the internal momentum within them was genuine. If one more godly way could be absorbed, then it would be to Zen's benefit in the long run. He jumped down the stairs and gave May a passing smile. May had initially intended to give it her all in comprehending the godly way tablet and get herself acknowledged. Seeing Zen easily succeed in doing so made her feel extremely disappointed. She watched him disappear into the distance and thought about just how different people could be. As he jumped down, Zen quickly made his decision and chose another godly way tablet. The tablet he chose had rays of raging flames circling around it. Before Zen could even climb, he already felt a scorching aura. The elementary fire godly way. This was the origin of all strange flames in the world and the purest form of fire. With the elementary fire godly way, one would be able to comprehend all kinds of mysterious flames. There were already 3 proving godly warriors on the stairs of this godly way tablet, and one of them was ranked second on the great list, Seth. The young man's eyes flashed when he saw Zen climb up the stairs. He then began to wonder whether Zen wanted to be acknowledged by the second godly way tablet. Normally, so long as one was acknowledged by a godly way tablet, then that person would automatically gain the qualifications to enter the Heavenly Han House. It was quite rare for a warrior to be acknowledged by 2 godly way tablets. Only 4 warriors had accomplished such a feat in history. Now, it seemed Zen was planning to do the same. Unknown to Seth, this wasn't exactly Zen's intended goal. The young man didn't just want to be acknowledged by mere 2 godly way tablets. If he was given enough time, Zen had every intention of letting all 300 godly way tablets be absorbed in the Infinity Ruler. Seth and the others made way for Zen the moment they saw him climb up the stairs. Seeing this, the other proving godly warriors all stopped comprehending and watched Zen intently. Huff, huff, just like what happened with the purple or a godly way, the moment Zen climbed, the internal momentum immediately surged towards him. This time, it came in the form of numerous fire birds. These flames were formed by the internal momentum and were capable of burning the soul. If one's soul was weak, then it would be incinerated in an instant. However, Zen was not afraid at all and allowed the fire birds to flow into his mind. Chapter 1790, Comprehension. The unending stream of fire birds rushed into Zen's mind, being destroyed like the internal momentum formed from the grand purple aura technique. When Zen closed his eyes, the sharp golden light on his soul's surface flashed, and all the fire birds formed from the internal momentum flames were exterminated instantly. While killing the fire birds that drilled into his mind, Zen also quietly observed the Infinity Ruler in his head. With his current abilities, he was still unable to control the ruler. Just now, when the ruler activated its special ability, it did so on its own. Now that Zen had paid attention to it, he finally discovered the reason. After the fire birds were shattered by Zen's soul pressure, they turned into the internal momentum power, quietly absorbed by Infinity Ruler. When the Infinity Ruler absorbed all the remaining internal momentum power to a certain extent, a golden light erupted from the section of the Infinity Ruler. Rumble. The golden light moved from one end of the ruler to the other, finally stopping at a scale on top of it. This scale should be the location the ruler reserved for the elementary fire godly way. As he had guessed, Zen understood that these 3,000 scales corresponded to 3,000 godly ways, even the location of each godly way had already been set. When the light stopped at the scale, another blazing light burst out and enveloped Zen's mind. When Zen opened his eyes again, a pair of golden light rings appeared around his pupils. Splash! With Zen's eyesight, he could see that on the tablet of the elementary fire godly way in front of him, the pure flames were like the unceasing surging of waves, the internal momentum became extremely chaotic. Although others might have thought that the internal momentum was a mess, Zen could see through everything it contained. The elementary fire godly way is the fire source. All the fire laws were developed from the elementary fire godly way. This godly way is divided into 4 different levels. The first level is to control fire, the second is to create fire, the third is to create spirit essence, and the fourth is to turn into objects. In others' eyes, the internal momentum seemed incomparably profound. It would have been difficult to understand even if one spent 10,000 years in comprehension. But in Zen's eyes, the mysterious internal momentum seemed rather simple. Even though Zen's comprehension ability far exceeded that of an ordinary talent, it was impossible for him to achieve such a level. That sudden enlightenment allowed Zen to see through the true meaning of the godly way tablet in a short period of time. It all started with the infinity ruler. Soon after, the light on the ruler dimmed along with the rings of light around Zen's pupils. Finally, it returned to normal and a bright yellow flame symbol condensed on the scale at the end of the ruler. I've succeeded. Once again, Zen's guess was verified. He was utterly excited. In this case, did it mean that he could control 3,000 godly ways? If all 3,000 godly ways were to be fused into the infinity ruler, what sorts of changes would occur? But it was no easy feat to gather all 3,000 godly ways. Zen had yet to personally witness the true godly way tablets. Although there were 300 or so tablets before him, their internal momentum wasn't quite perfect. Since the ruler can record the imperfect internal momentum, in theory, the internal momentum of other true gods would be absorbed as well. Though Zen managed to think something up, it couldn't be verified. If he had the chance to spar with a true god in the future, he could take the risk. When the internal momentum on the godly way tablet began to calm down, a pillar of fiery red light shot into the sky. At the same time, a ball of fire spread from the godly way tablet and wrapped around Zen. Though the fire light wasn't scorching, it made people feel quite warm. He was acknowledged by the second godly way tablet. Alas, even in my dreams, I struggle to be acknowledged by a godly way tablet. But even after spending so much time in comprehension, I've achieved nothing. How can this guy do it as easily as drinking water? He shouldn't have come to the heavenly Han house. He should have gone straight to the floating island. Why would he want to be compared to us on this level? All the proving godly warriors in the consulting god hall envied Zen, feeling disappointed. They came from second-tier and third-tier clans and every one of their movements showed off the arrogance they were born with. But Zen's moves had completely destroyed their confidence. But now, Malloy and the others outside the consulting god hall were relieved. If they immediately declared the result after Zen's acknowledgement from the Grand Purple Aura technique, they would have offended Joy. And once Joy got angry about the matter, no one in the Han clan could bear the consequence. Now that Zen had gained the recognition of the elementary fire godly way, things were much easier. Everyone just pretended not to know of the previous happenings. As Zen turned to leave the godly way tablet, Malloy's voice echoed throughout the entire hall once again. Thad Luo from the Misty Mountain Village has been acknowledged by the elementary fire godly way. Now, Zen had become the second proving godly warrior who had passed the Han clan's test. After Zane passed the test, he left the hall without so much as looking back. The place was filled with the internal momentum's pressure, pushing great pressure onto one's soul. No one was willing to stay there for long. But Zen had no intention of leaving. Everyone watched in silence as Zen jumped down from the steps and looked at the godly way tablet beside him. Even if there were some talents who could comprehend several godly ways simultaneously and be recognized by a few godly way tablets, such godly ways were all limited to a few specific kinds. But Zen did not select the godly ways at all and instead tried to comprehend the godly ways individually. Amazing, this guy hasn't selected the godly ways at all. He is comprehending them one by one. Seth's mouth was agape as he looked at Zen. It's impossible for such a powerful warrior to exist. Maybe he just coincidentally comprehended the Grand Purple Aura technique in the elementary fire godly way. He might not be able to comprehend the third godly way. One of the nearby warriors denied it though. He couldn't believe that there was such a coincidence. Zen's actions were just too inconceivable, already exceeding his imagination and understanding. The warrior was unwilling to admit such a thing. If he can be acknowledged by that tablet of the tortoise godly way, I will accept the fact. A short while later, a beam of gray light began shining atop the tablet of the tortoise godly way. As it turned out, Zen was acknowledged by the tablet of the tortoise godly way. Upon seeing this scene, quite a few proving godly warriors couldn't help but swallow. While the matter came as a terrible blow to some of them, others rejoiced as they watched the unimaginable scene. Outside the consulting god hall, Malloy and the group of true gods who taught the godly ways glanced at each other, recognizing the strong shock in the depths of each other's eyes. The older true gods had lived for about 9 divine eras and the younger ones had been born in this era, but they had never heard of such a strange thing. I heard that after Pascal became a proving godly warrior and returned from the divine refinement Forbidden Land, he had comprehended 4 godly ways consecutively in a year. He was also already an outstanding warrior on the floating island. Thad Luo has now been acknowledged by 3 godly ways, and he. Malloy's expression turned solemn, but his heart was filled with ecstasy. He had to prove his value to the Han clan after he took the position of the leader of the Heavenly Han House. If he really did recommend Zen, the Han clan would be more friendly toward the sub-branches of the clan. He doesn't have any plans to stop. He has already climbed to the 4th godly way tablet, the old man surnamed Chen said. Should we go and stop him? It's too much, said another true god. Malloy looked rather hesitant, but eventually, he shook his head. He couldn't tell how Zen had done it, but since Zen didn't want to step out, Malloy had no intention of stopping him. And so, in front of everyone, Zen comprehended the 5th tablet, the 6th tablet, the 7th. The scene left everyone stunned. Many proving godly warriors could only sigh as they groped for their own godly way, hoping to gain the acknowledgement of the godly way tablet by comprehending it. Soon enough, Seth came in 3rd, passing the test. But he didn't look the slightest bit happy about it. After all, there was a remarkable warrior in the consulting god hall that could easily earn the acknowledgement of the godly way as easily as breathing. After working so hard, Seth obtained the acknowledgement of the elementary fire godly way, but it was all for nothing. He could only sigh lightly and with a face heavy with sadness, he turned his head and left the consulting god hall. In spite of all Seth's experience in the world, he was still deeply shocked and disappointed inside. Chapter 1791. The end of the big test. The test that took place within the consulting god hall of Heavenly Han House usually lasted a total of 7 days. To proving godly warriors, the Heavenly Han House's test wasn't just an exam to verify their abilities, but even more so, an opportunity for cultivation. There were a few of the proving godly warriors who usually listened to the teachings of true gods outside the Heavenly Han House. Now that they were inside the consulting god hall, they were capable of using what they had learned in order to comprehend the internal momentum inscribed on the godly way tablets. Despite the fact that these godly way tablets were only mere imitations, being here was still a rare opportunity for such proving godly warriors to cultivate. Throughout the 7 days, more and more proving godly warriors were recognized by the godly way tablets. For these proving godly warriors, they entered the most crucial stage in their entire lives after the recognition. It was then that their fate would be completely changed forever. This was because the chances of one mastering godly ways in the Heavenly Han House were rather high. Becoming a true god in the future was equivalent to obtaining the chance of living forever, as well as other limitless possibilities. As for Zen, things were a little different on his behalf. Over the past few days, all of the proving godly warriors present had been used to watching miracles he had created. Zen tirelessly traversed through the godly way tablets, continuously absorbing their internal momentum, and he was equally constantly acknowledged by the godly way tablets. Other than the grand purple aura technique, there were certain other godly ways that required special conditions and physiques for cultivation. However, despite the fact that Zen had ignored these requirements, he had just as well received the acknowledgement from these godly way tablets, too. This was more than miraculous. In the eyes of the other disbelieving warriors, Zen seemed to have used some sort of trick to achieve this. Such a trick was completely unheard of though, and therefore, its possibilities really came as an astonishment to everyone. The Heavenly Han House didn't interfere. Although Zen had disrupted the internal momentum on the godly way tablets in a very short period of time, it hadn't caused much damage to the godly way tablets. Now, the more outstanding Zen's performance became, the more confident the Heavenly Han House would be when they recommended candidates to the Han clan on the floating island. It took approximately an hour to absorb the internal momentum of a godly way tablet into the Infinity Ruler. Over the course of these 7 days and their nights, Zen hadn't rested in the least. And yet, he had only successfully absorbed the internal momentum of 260 godly way tablets. Moreover, Zen looked absolutely drained on the last day, which was to be expected, considering the amount of energy he had spent. In fact, every time he absorbed the internal momentum of a godly way tablet, he would first have to resist the attacks of the internal momentum. Zen's soul might be as strong as a true god's, but currently, his soul force was constantly being consumed. Without any rest, his soul force gradually weakened and he became very tired. When Malloy announced the end of the Heavenly Han House test, Zen helplessly glanced at the remaining Godly Way tablets. The Godly Way tablets that stood in the distance were still radiating light, seemingly calling for him, but because he had to follow the rules, he had no other choice but to leave the Consulting God Hall along with the others. A small total of 67 of the original 100,000 proving godly warriors received Godly Way tablets acknowledgements. Compared to last year's number of less than 20 warriors though, this year's total was more than 3 times the number of last year. Even when comparing the total to the number on a bumper year, 67 was still pretty impressive. Certainly, Malloy and the group of true gods were quite satisfied with this number. And of all the warriors who had received acknowledgements, Zen was the one who gave them the most confidence. Malloy felt the sudden impulse to contact the Han clan right away and send Zen to the floating island immediately. Every 16 years, the main Han clan would send someone to Heavenly Han House in order to recruit a group of warriors and bring them to the floating island for cultivation. It had already been 15 years since the last time the main Han clan had come here for recruitment. Next year, the main Han clan would once again come to the Heavenly Han House in order to recruit warriors. Not only would they pick a portion of true gods, they would also inspect outstanding proving godly warriors. The year before the main Han clan came to select warriors was also the year when the Heavenly Han House held a bigger test. These proving godly warriors hoped that they would be lucky enough to be chosen by the Han clan and enter the floating island, thus becoming a member of the Divine Land's core power and rising to prominence. That said though, the Han clan sub-branches equally had special rights when it came to recommending warriors. If they were to meet an extremely outstanding warrior, they wouldn't have to wait the aforementioned 16 years. The only requirement was to send someone to apply to the main Han clan, but the precondition was that the warrior really had outstanding abilities. The few proving godly warriors who had successfully passed through the Heavenly Han House's test were arranged to stay in a courtyard, while the rest were dismissed. Those who failed could only wait until next year to take the test once again. The courtyard where the select 67 stayed was very elegantly constructed, with a few bridges built on top of a beautiful pond. Within the pond, a group of little fish with golden scales could be seen swimming around happily. Pink lotus flowers adorned the water and here, they would never wilt. The 67 proving godly warriors here, in this wondrous courtyard, were the lucky ones that had passed this year's Heavenly Han House test. A handful of them, such as Zane and Seth, had been acknowledged by the Godly Way tablets on the very first day that they entered the Consulting God Hall. They had easily been waiting here for 6 days now. Zen sat upright on a large stone beside a rockery, his eyes closed as he attempted to recuperate his strength as best he could. As it was, his soul was currently in a deep slumber, and this was the soul recovery technique that Master Evil had taught him. The cultivation methods that Master Evil practiced were nothing extraordinary, nor did they have any special origins. But someone like Master Evil, who had learned martial arts in his own way, indeed had a few practical methods to share. The soul recovery technique for one, was a technique that allowed one to reserve a little soul power in order to maintain a minimum of vigilance, while the soul fell into a deep slumber. This way, one would be capable of recovering their soul power more rapidly within a shorter period of time. Throughout the past few days though, Zen had simply felt too tired. He needed to have a good rest in order to better replenish the soul force that he had consumed. As for the other proving godly warriors, they gathered in groups of 2s or 3s. Most of them wore very excited expressions, as if they were very surprised that they managed to pass Heavenly Han House's test. It was only natural for them to feel such joy. It wasn't until the very last moment, on the 7th day in the Consulting God Hall, that May received the acknowledgement of the Godly Way tablet she had cultivated and successfully passed the Heavenly Han House test. Eric, who had had a conflict with Zen in the past, equally succeeded the test on the 5th day. After leaving everyone to wait in the courtyard for a day, the Heavenly Han House arranged a place for each one of them to stay as well as a few basic living materials. From this day forward, in certain ways, they had become members of the Heavenly Han House. They could cultivate here as well as listen to the true God's teachings at will daily. Zen, who had quickly settled down in his residence, continued his exploration of the internal momentum of godly ways that he had absorbed. Sitting upright on the ground, a strand of purple mist began floating out of his palms, following a light pat of his hands. The purple mist split into many paths that were only partly visible. These paths randomly formed their own unique arrangements. According to the arrangements of such paths, one could create a few mysterious arrays. The Grand Purple Aura technique itself is an embodiment of the laws. It can be used to create sword arrays. No wonder Margaret is capable of grasping the gods-killing sword array, Zen said faintly. After comprehending the internal momentum, Zen could use the Grand Purple Aura technique as he pleased. Following such, Zen lightly clapped his hands, and the purple mist turned into a purple cyan wyvern. The wyvern prostrated onto his fingers and lowered its body. With a light flick of his fingers, the wyvern flew outward, circled around the room, and returned to the form of purple mist before returning to Zen's hand. This ruler is simply unreasonable. I have roamed the divine land for many years and have never heard of such a divine object. Even a first-rank supreme primordial weapon doesn't have an ability extreme enough to hold 3,000 godly ways. Just what is this thing? Asked Master Evil. Over the past few days, Master Evil had witnessed the Infinity Ruler's entire process of absorbing the godly ways. Every time the Infinity Ruler was activated, Zen would always consume the internal momentum into his mind, which equally posed a threat to Master Evil's remnant soul. In the end though, Master Evil was left with no other choice but to sit back quietly in a corner and watch the scene as it played out. All he could do was watch as the internal momentum of the godly ways was continuously absorbed, transforming into tiny marks on the Infinity Ruler. Having lived in the divine land for so long, Master Evil was quite experienced, and he had long heard of certain powerful treasures across the divine land. Those treasures were all in the hands of the holy beings of the divine land, though. The holy emperor of the Han clan had a sky-killing blade, which was an extremely rare supreme primordial weapon, but it was impossible for it to possess such outrageous abilities. If Zen was given the chance to observe all the 3,000 godly ways, wouldn't he be able to master all of them? As the voice of Master Evil faded away from his mind, the purple mist in Zen's hand began to dissipate and once again condensed itself into traces of a grayish-white internal momentum. The streams of grayish-white internal momentum quickly condensed into a small, round shield. A large number of hexagonal patterns appeared on the surface of the shield, making it resemble a tortoise shell. This was a technique used to protect one's body from the tortoise godly way. While Zen was continuously experimenting with his newfound techniques, a voice came from outside. "Thad, the house master wants to meet you," it said. Upon hearing the voice from a short distance away, Zen jumped up from the ground. With a flip of his palm, the tortoise shell instantly disappeared, and a profound look appeared in his eyes. He wondered what Malloy wanted to say to him. Chapter 1792, A Top-Rank True God. Malloy was seated within the main hall of the Heavenly Han house. There were equally two people sitting by his side, both of whom were at the peak of the cultivation level of mid-rank true gods. They weren't true gods of the Heavenly Han house who taught the godly ways, but they were leaders of the Han clan sub-branches. Although the sub-branches of the Han clan were not considered as powerful as the rich clans on the floating islands, they were still first-tier clans. The strength and number of the true gods from these clans far exceeded that of ordinary second-tier or third-tier clan. Currently, there were a total of 27 sub-branches of Han clan, each respectively led by one of the 27 sub-branch leaders. These two specific individuals were the leader of the 9th sub-branch, Luke Han, and the leader of the 12th sub-branch, Declan Han. Zane, who himself had just entered the Heavenly Han house, was Luke Han's son. The news we received earlier from Mirror City has just been confirmed. Thad Luo's origin is very suspicious, Luke Han said with a frown. Ever since the moment Zen had risen to prominence in the Brilliant Moon restaurant, many forces had tried to track his background down. However, at the time, the information that Zen had provided was too little, and despite their many inquiries, they still hadn't found any clues concerning Zen's background. For this reason, on their list, they could only describe him as the mysterious youth. Not long ago though, during the Heavenly Han house examination in fact, Zen had mentioned that he came from the Misty Mountain village of the vast sky region. That was when the Han clan had sent people out to investigate Zen's identity. And the Han clan's efficiency was very high. Within no more than a few days, they had found the divine citizens of the Misty Mountain village. At first, the answers given by the divine citizens in the Misty Mountain village were exactly the same as what Zen had said. Zen indeed seemed to come from the Misty Mountain village. After the further investigation though, they quickly began to discover a few truths which included a conflict between the Misty Mountain village and the Sun Moon village, as well as Master Evil's return. They also knew that Zen wasn't a native of the Misty Mountain village. He had stayed in the Misty Mountain village for less than half a year, and the divine citizens of the Misty Mountain village were actually completely unaware of Zen's origin. As a result, up to that point, Zen's identity had remained a mystery. After all, he was deliberately concealing it and thus discovering it wasn't going to be an easy task. I think so too, Declan Han said as he nodded his head in agreement. This guy deliberately hides his identity and then sneaks his way into the Han clan. He probably has some kind of conspiracy. The forces within the Divine Land all developed according to the model of a specific clan, and they each attached high importance to the backgrounds of the people they cultivated. Although the Han clan would also train outsiders in order to own more talents, they thought it was important to figure out the outsiders' background first. They wouldn't just train some strange martial artist whose origins and intentions were completely unknown to them. There were 67 warriors who had entered the Heavenly Han house. Aside from Zen, the Han clan was fully and clearly aware of the other warriors' backgrounds. Even more so, their lineage could be traced back several generations. Zen possessed such a remarkable talent, and yet, his origins remained mysterious. To anyone dealing with this situation, it indeed seemed weird. Malloy smiled, but it was barely noticeable. How can there be so many schemes? Maybe Thad Luo is a talent from a floating island. Malloy, on his behalf, equally didn't believe that Zen was an ordinary divine citizen simply born in a remote village. It was impossible for such a character to exist in a small and remote village, anyway. The Divine Land had developed over so many years, and all its resources had been monopolized by the wealthy clans. And the talents had been continually inherited through blood lineage. It was extremely rare that such an outstanding warrior would be born in a remote, poor village. Do you really think there's still a rich clan on the floating island willing to allow one of their talents to cultivate outside, alone? Even if that was the case, would our Han clan be willing to accept him? Declan Han asked again, with more emphasis this time. Malloy glanced at Declan Han and smiled, more obviously this time. Since the two of you are having such thoughts, how do you think we should deal with Thad, then? Expel him from the Heavenly Han house, As long as the two of you and Bentley agree, I won't hesitate, not even for a second. Upon hearing Malloy's words, Declan Han and Luke Han fell silent, adding nothing more to the conversation. To put it bluntly, you both just want me to take all the responsibility. You want to recommend Thad to the floating island, but you're equally worried about his unknown origin. If something happens in the future, you don't want to be implicated. Malloy's eyes glittered. If that's the case, then speak up, and I will take the responsibility. Malloy's words had clearly revealed Luke Han's and Declan Han's true feelings. Their facial features were completely distorted now. If the Han clan sub-branches didn't provide a suitable candidate, then the Han clan would really take some actions, and if that were to be the case, the 27 Han clan sub-branches would be in deep trouble. Through the Heavenly Han house's test, they were capable of figuring out that Zen had a remarkable talent. This fellow clearly surpassed an ordinary talent, and by far. Even among the rich clans on the floating islands, never had there been such an extraordinary proving godly warrior in the past. In their eyes, this proving godly warrior was like a tender shoot that had just emerged from the ground. Zen was a little too strong for his own good, though. If he were to condense a godly tile in his inner world in the future, wouldn't he naturally become a disciple of the Holy Emperor? Not necessarily, you don't have to. In the past, the sub-branches of the Han clan have always been one and the same. How could we let you bear all the responsibility alone? Luke Han said. Yeah, why don't we ask that about it later? Maybe it's not as we're imagining it to be. Declan Han was next to speak. Both Luke Han and Declan Han offered their words with a slight awkwardness. It was at that moment that someone was heard uttering just outside the main hall, Thad Luo has arrived. Malloy nodded in response and said, let him in. It was only a few short moments later that Zen slowly walked inside. Malloy's lips curled into a smile and he said politely, Thad, please sit here. Zen nodded his head and sat down in the chair, a little off to the side. At the same time, he asked, may I know why you've summoned me here? In total honesty, Zen had a rough idea of that reason. Seeing as he had already spoken of where he came from to the Han clan, they had definitely summoned him in order to investigate his background. Prior to leaving the Misty Mountain village, Zen had told the villagers to keep his identity a secret from all the others. However, most of the divine citizens of the Misty Mountain village had never been to a divine city. It was thus impossible for them to hide it from the members of the Heavenly Han house. Today, it was highly likely that Malloy had personally invited him here just to investigate him in depth. Despite that, Zen was feeling confident and had already made up his mind. He wasn't the slightest bit flustered and instead asked Malloy first, before he had even had the chance to speak. Malloy was caught off guard as Zen questioned him like that and a trace of unnatural emotion immediately appeared on his face. The expression disappeared in a flash before he chuckled. To be honest, all of the disciples that we recruit are treated like family. But according to the rules that have been passed down from our ancestors for generations and generations, we need to investigate into all disciples' backgrounds. Of course, Zen understood that it was just as he had guessed. The members of the Heavenly Han House had really traveled to the Misty Mountain Village and had already discovered that something was wrong. From what we've learned from the Misty Mountain Village, it seems that something doesn't match up just right. What you've told us, Malloy continued. Declan Han and Luke Han also looked straight at Zen, as if they wanted to decipher something from his expression or pick up on some kind of clue. You're right, I am indeed not from the Misty Mountain Village. No one had expected Zen to admit it so openly, and with a faint smile on his face. His honest words made the three true gods feel an odd mix of discomfort and surprise. Malloy continued calmly and asked, then where exactly are you from? It didn't really matter where Zen genuinely came from. What was important was that they needed a credible background. They needed to know he would not do harm to the Han clan. Zen just shook his head. I can't say, he replied. Of course, there was no way he'd admit that he was Mike's son from the evolutionary universe just to enter the Heavenly Han House. On the other hand though, he also couldn't make up a false identity for himself. After all, with the Han clan members' abilities, they would surely check and figure out his lies with ease. Therefore, he had no other choice but to answer honestly. Hearing this, Declan Han coldly and promptly said, we don't accept warriors of unknown origins. Luke Han agreed with a single nod of his head. Indeed, I hope you'd cherish this opportunity. There was a hint of threat in their words, which was to warn Zen that if he didn't tell them where he came from, he would probably be expelled from the Heavenly Han House immediately. If that's really the case, then that's quite a pity. I'm afraid I can only choose to leave the Heavenly Han House, Zen said with a look of regret on his face. Joining the Heavenly Han House was only a shortcut to get to the floating island. If he couldn't take the shortcut successfully, he would find himself another way. If he were to reveal his identity though, now that would be quite a serious matter. It was impossible for him to reveal his identity just to enter the Heavenly Han House. As the words left his mouth, Luke Han and Declan Han kept silent. They had wanted to threaten Zen with the qualification to join the Heavenly Han House, but Zen didn't seem to care in the least. Malloy glanced at Luke Han and Declan Han indifferently, and shrugged his shoulders. He knew that Zen wasn't an idiot, and since he possessed such great talent, every proving godly house would be eager to admit him. Did he even care about the qualification to join the Heavenly Han House? Malloy continued wondering to himself. Just as Malloy was thinking about how to continue his attempt in persuading Zen, a figure appeared in the sky above the Heavenly Han House, slowly descending into its main hall. This warrior can actually fly within the divine land. Zen's eyes suddenly flashed with astonishment, realizing that the warrior was a top-ranked true god. But who was he, and why did he come here? Chapter 1793, Testing Zen. Across all the divine land, only top-ranked true gods and those above their level had the right to fly in the skies. In the past, Zen had never known very much about the rules set by the holy beings. It wasn't that proving godly warriors and low to mid-rank true gods couldn't fly, but that their abilities were actually limited. Thanks to Master Evil's explanation though, Zen was capable of solving the doubt he felt in both heart and mind. The wealthy and powerful clans on the floating islands that had entered the Time Sea first were all bent on consolidating their status. Therefore, they would without a doubt use all sorts of methods in order to hinder the other clans from rising to prominence. For this reason, back in the Middle Ages, many wealthy and powerful clans on the floating islands teamed up together in order to establish such a rule on the ruling slate. It was thus stipulated that only those on and above the level of top-ranked true gods could fly in the air, and that furthermore, only those on and above the level of consummate true gods could use the space law. Due to this rule, the newcomers naturally lost many opportunities. After all, there were many forbidden areas within the divine land that would be very difficult for them to explore if they weren't allowed to fly. Therefore, very few newcomers had been bestowed the title of holy being over the past few years. Becoming a holy being was now quite a challenge. Someone suddenly flew down from the sky and steadily landed without hesitation in the main hall. Immediately after his arrival, a faint sense of majesty spread throughout the hall. Although he didn't release any soul pressure, he did give off a very natural force. The force itself didn't come from him in fact, but from his inner world. As a top-ranked true god, his inner world had already been perfected. It had become a huge entity, and therefore he radiated a sense of majesty. Similarly, Estelle on the second floor of the dungeon gave Zen an inexplicable sense of mystery. The individual who had just landed looked extremely young, but his face faintly revealed a sense of lethargy. It was almost certain that in reality, he must have lived for a long time, and he must be unimaginably old. Malloy, Luke, and Declan stood up and saluted him. Upon seeing them do so, Zen equally followed suit. Despite the fact that the Heavenly Han House seemed to want to expel him, he still had to be polite and show his respect, at the very least. The arrival was Bentley Han, the man whom Malloy had mentioned earlier. He was the leader of all the Han clan's sub-branches, and thus, the 27 sub-branches were all under his command. It was just a few days ago that he had heard about Zen. Not long afterward, he came to find out that Zen was born in a strange place, and therefore, he presented himself today in order to decide what should be done. Once Bentley had pleasantly greeted everyone present, his gaze shifted directly to Zen. When he noticed Zen's redemption armor, his eyes opened wide as he asked, "What kind of treasure is this robe you're wearing?" Malloy and the other two also paid attention to Zen's robe as Bentley asked this question. From the outside, Zen's dark robe didn't look like anything special. In fact, even ordinary true gods wouldn't be able to see any difference. Zen smiled thinly. Before he could say anything, Bentley stretched his hand out at once and formed numerous abnormally sharp red thorns between his fingers. Seconds later, they were clawing towards Zen's chest. Although Bentley wasn't using his full strength, he was still a top-ranked true god, and had already reached the upper level of the godly way. This sudden attack from him was shockingly fast and absolutely powerful nonetheless. Not only did Zen not have the chance to react, but even Malloy and the others weren't expecting such an attack at all. Creak. Bentley was like a hungry black bear whose only intention was to dig Zen's heart out. His thorn attack was so extreme that if it was directed at a true god, even his heart would be ripped out in an instant. But when these ferocious thorns reached Zen's redemption armor, they did nothing but let out a sharp scraping sound. Even more surprisingly, the attack didn't even scratch Zen's robe. In fact, it didn't even leave a mark. As the leader of the Han clan's sub-branches, Bentley's strength was unquestionable. So much so that it was safe to say that the power contained within his grab was something that even ordinary true gods found hard to resist. In order to become consummate true gods, many top-ranked true gods began to condense the 9 divine stars. Bentley had even condensed 6 stars that contained strength source. The eyes of Malloy, Luke and Declan all shone brightly as they watched this scene play out before them. It had never crossed any of their minds that Zen could have been wearing such a protective treasure. Zen took a few steps backward and his dashing eyebrows creased as he bore the brunt of Bentley's attack. Limited by the rules stated on the 1,000 Commandments slate, warriors couldn't fight as they pleased in 6-burden divine city. If 2 warriors wanted to challenge each other here, they would have to pay a divine might coin. However, Bentley, the top-ranked true god standing before them, acted as if he was not bound by the 1,000 Commandments slate in any way at all. Zen felt somewhat annoyed, but his anger soon subsided. Only a select few people were born with the right to disrespect the rules. And Zen wasn't stupid. Of course, he didn't think that everyone from the Han clan would be nice, and he knew very well that the weak would stand as an easy prey to the strong. However, the fact that he entered 6-burden divine city alone and displayed a certain level of talent and strength was, in and of itself, quite an adventure. Now though, he had to endure. If he truly succeeded in pissing these people off, he might not ever be capable of leaving 6-burden divine city. Now, what's that supposed to mean? Zen asked, frowning. Well, I just wanted to test your abilities. You're quite quick to react, I must say. Bentley chuckled and once again transformed into a blurry shadow, charging towards Zen, regardless of whether Zen agreed or not. His attack speed far exceeded Zen's reaction speed. Before Zen could prepare himself, a pair of claws had already reached his chest again. On the one hand, Bentley wanted to test Zen's reaction and strength. And on the other hand, he seemed to be trying to determine the exact material of Zen's robe. Despite whatever he was trying to do though, he was certainly being rude. Zen remembered the rules stated on the 1,000 Commandments slate and didn't know if he even had the right to retaliate. As a top-ranked true god, Bentley could tease Zen as easily as an eagle trying to catch a baby chick stuck on the ground. Zen was reclining backwards almost instinctively, his body twisting back like a carp. At the same time though, he took a sword step forward, displaying an unimaginable pace. Bentley's claws swept straight past Zen's chest, but they didn't touch Zen at all. Zen had succeeded in dodging them cleverly. Bentley didn't manage to catch Zen with his second attack. He took a few steps forward. There was an awkward expression on his face as he pinched his fingers tightly together. Although he had originally acted in a playful manner, his grab was definitely not something a mere proving godly warrior could have avoided. Let alone Zen. Had it been Malloy, Luke, or any of the others, it wouldn't have been easy for them to avoid Bentley's grab. Sir, I have already passed the Heavenly Han House's test, but you still want to test me. A hint of anger could be heard in Zen's tone of voice. Your movement technique is amazing. It's absolutely intriguing and interesting to me. Bentley didn't heed Zen's words and turned his body in order to charge at him once again, his speed increasing by 30%. And just as before, Zen performed a set of footwork and even used the 8 smoky melodies in order to avoid the attack. His entire body danced in the air like a willow catkin, but Bentley's speed far exceeded the range that Zen could cope with. When he used the 8 smoky melodies, his greatest fear was absolute speed. In the blink of an eye, Bentley flashed behind Zen and quickly grabbed his lapel, throwing him into the distance. Whir! Zen's body spun in the air and plummeted toward the other side of the main hall. Fortunately, Bentley had shown a little mercy. Zen twisted his body in the air and glided along the ground for quite a few yards. He stood up as soon as he could and turned himself around. As he was standing there though, he began to feel an irresistible force coming from behind him, pushing him forward by several steps and almost knocking him down again. Zen suddenly looked very miserable. Malloy, Luke, and Declan quickly looked at each other. Their expressions were wild, their hearts in turmoil. They had invited Bentley to decide whether or not to keep Zen. After all, Bentley was the leader of sub-branches. They hadn't expected the fact that Bentley had never asked them about Zen's origins and background, nor had he discussed whether to keep Zen with them. Instead, as soon as he had arrived, he had begun teasing Zen. After all, he was a top-ranked true god. Was there really any point in fooling around with a proving godly warrior? Did he not feel shameless? Moreover, Zen had been very tough when they threatened to expel him earlier. Would Bentley offend him by acting in such a way? Malloy was unsure of all this. After a moment of hesitation, he stretched out his hand and shouted, "Master Bentley." Bentley ignored him and simply smiled with relish instead. "You haven't fallen yet, then watch this." With that, he once again turned into a gust of wind and floated toward Zen. This time, Zen's eyes flashed with a fierce light. He respected Bentley as a top-ranked true god, but these repeated attacks were too much for him to handle right now. He didn't dodge the attack this time and only used a single hand to swipe at Bentley. Bentley's face revealed a look of contempt. In his opinion, a proving godly warrior was just as weak as a baby. He reached out his left hand in an attempt to brush away Zen's right hand. However, just as he reached outward, Zen abruptly changed his hand's direction and firmly grabbed Bentley's arm like a pair of iron pincers. Given his reaction and speed though, it was very easy for Bentley to avoid Zen. Despite that though, he didn't attempt to dodge Zen at all. Instead, he planned to use brute force in order to break free from Zen's grasp once he had caught his arm. Unexpectedly, just as he tried to struggle free slightly, his expression suddenly froze. Chapter 1794, A Little Freak. Zen's intention wasn't to offend this guy in any way. That said though, having been toyed with like an ant over and over again, Zen had had enough. Even a Buddha would have become angry with such teasing. As Zen took action, the 9 divine stars in his body began revolving crazily. The surging energy quickly converged into a torrent of energy that gushed outward, gathering in his hands faster than ever. In addition to the 30% of strength source that his body could withstand, he also released the remaining 70% of his power through the cross-world Thurgy. This 70% power formed a giant invisible hand that grabbed the middle section of his opponent's arm. In that very moment, it was as if Zen had 3 hands that worked together and simultaneously grabbed Bentley. Bentley, who was a top-ranked true god, had already condensed 6 divine stars, therefore, he also had his own strength source. Despite that though, the 6 stars that were hidden within his body were much smaller than Zen's. The strength source of the 9 divine stars in Zen's body came from Holy J. At the time, he had absorbed a third of Holy J's total strength source. Although Zen's use of the strength source was far from being as efficient as Holy J's, and the fact was that it didn't even compare to Bentley's power in the least, it was still completely terrifying when it poured out. Moreover, Bentley hadn't expected Zen to unleash such a terrifying power. He felt that Zen's hands were like iron pincers, and even more shockingly, there was an invisible hand that seemed to be grabbing onto him at the same time. Furthermore, the invisible hand's power was great, causing his arm to creak. He felt like it was going to snap like a twig on a tree. This overwhelming power only lasted for a brief moment. With a flip of his body, Zen twisted his hand and threw Bentley backward. Beneath the surge of such a huge force, Bentley didn't have time to resist. Confusion was written all over his wrinkled face as Zen sent him flying at an extremely fast speed. His body soared through the air and smashed into the wall of the main building, destroying it into hundreds of little pieces. The wall then turned into dust in a flash, as if it was made of flour. This hit didn't stop Bentley's momentum though. Boom, 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 boom. After smashing through at least 7 or 8 walls consecutively, Bentley had finally managed to stop himself from going further by relying on his own power and strength. Finally, his body collapsed to the ground with an atrocious thud. Bentley's body was now covered in dust, and before landing, he had crashed into a few flower pots. A few fresh and tender flowers were stuck in his hair, making him look both bedraggled and odd at the same time. Bentley, who was still lying on the ground, was still in a daze and felt dizzy. It took him at least half a minute before finally reacting. Upon standing up, he saw a room full of people, including the old man surnamed Wu, who was giving a lecture to the disciples of the Heavenly Han House. As he noticed Bentley suddenly bump in, his mouth fell wide open. Although the old man had rarely seen Bentley throughout his lifetime, he knew Bentley was the leader of the 27 Han clan sub-branches. Thus, he asked in fluster, "Sir, are you okay?" Among the students were also many members from the Han clan sub-branches. They also wore strange expressions on their faces as they looked toward their leader. Bentley was a top-ranked true god. Who could have caused him to be in such a sorry state, here in the 6th-burden divine city? Everyone looked as though they had seen a ghost, or worse, that they would have preferred seeing a ghost over witnessing this scene. Bentley shook his head and smiled helplessly. "I'm fine. I was just sparring with a little kid, but there was an accident." A little kid? The old man's eyes widened and he raised his brows. He suddenly had a premonition. Was it possible that the little kid he was referring to could be Thad? That was impossible though, he thought to himself. Thad was just a proving godly warrior. No matter how powerful his abilities were, he would never have the capacity of throwing Bentley all the way over here. Bentley also felt very embarrassed. Worse, he felt ashamed that the fight had ended in such a way. After getting up, he quietly went back through the holes he had made in the walls. In order to see whether he had guessed right or not, the old man surnamed Wu also took a few steps forward and stuck his head into the first hole. Several layers of walls within the Heavenly Han house had holes that followed each other in a straight line, which were caused by Bentley. The old man surnamed Wu peeped through the holes and his gaze landed directly on the main hall. With this single glimpse, his eyes immediately widened. In the main hall, he could see Thad standing there, right smack in the center. He was looking at the other end of the holes with cold, emotionless eyes. It really was this kid. The old man suddenly paled, unable to utter a single word. And the old man wasn't the only one who felt completely dumbstruck at that very moment. Even Malloy, Luke, and Declan were staring with wide eyes at the scene playing out in front of them. In truth, from the very beginning, the three of them had been against the idea of Bentley attacking Zen. The purpose of the Heavenly Han House was to send a qualified candidate to the Han clan on the floating island in order to maintain the Han clan's confidence in them. From Thad's performance alone, he indeed had the qualifications to be recommended, thus rendering Bentley's test completely meaningless. However, as the leader of the Han clan sub-branches, Bentley hadn't been prudent and calm enough. He had lived for over 30 divine eras, and he could easily be considered the Han clan's senior. Despite being rather old, wise and having lived for such a long time, he was definitely not a calm individual. Many true gods made the decision to simply let their appearance age with the passing of time, especially after their ages crossed certain limits. Thus, in the divine land, it was quite common to see true gods who looked very old. This was because if one lived for too long, their body would naturally exude a lethargic aura. They might be able to change their appearance to that of a teenager, but it was completely out of tune with the lethargic aura that they continued to exude. There were only a few women with very long lifespans that could use a secret technique to dispel the lethargic aura. No matter how long they lived, they were still as charming as ever. Bentley hadn't dispelled his old aura, but he still gave himself a younger look. Such a behavior made him seem quite unreliable. Despite that, one's personality didn't have anything to do with one's strength. Bentley's talent was good, and back in the day, he had almost become the Holy Emperor's disciple. Unfortunately, he still lost the battle by a hair and thus lost an extremely important opportunity in his life. In the end, he took the initiative to leave the floating island of the Han clan and return to the Han clan sub-branches in order to become the leader. Only a few moments ago, due to Bentley's provocation, Zen had angrily thrown him out. And now, he was still raging. In Zen's mind, Master Evil was also shocked. After seeing the many skills that Zen had displayed though, and the fact that he also knew Zen's identity, he could much more easily accept the scene than the others. What he hadn't expected was for Zen to seriously attack Bentley. He then said to Zen, "You are too impulsive. Your strength is indeed astonishing, but if the fight gets serious, you might not necessarily be a low-rank True God's opponent and a mid-rank True God can easily kill you. Bentley is an outstanding top-rank True God and you will be doomed if you actually offended him." Master Evil had lived in the vast sky region for many years now, and of course, he had heard of Bentley. In the Han clan's ancestral land, other than a few old fellows who had retreated back to their homeland, Bentley was probably the strongest. Now Zen had taken Bentley by surprise and had thrown him out in such a way, causing him to suffer a huge loss as well as lose his face. Master Evil had every reason to be worried that things might not end so well for Zen. If I were to tolerate that over and over again, what would this guy have ended up doing to me? Zen retorted in his mind. He did that only to force me to show the limits of my strength, or to investigate my background. I can die, but there are some things that will never be revealed, he said aloud in his mind. His father had indeed placed his greatest hopes in him, but Zen wasn't his only hope. After all, there were still Nathan and the other godly geniuses in the evolutionary universe. Upon hearing this, Master Evil fell silent. He could feel Zen's determination, and he understood how heavy the burden on his back was for him to reach his goal. Although he had an extraordinary origin, that he was the son of a holy being and what was more, he was a disciple of another holy being, he still had to pay a greater price than any other ordinary warriors with such unique advantages. Zen's gaze was as calm as the surface of a motionless lake as he stared at Bentley, who was walking over through the holes, one wall at a time. Bentley stepped out from the final hole and gently shook himself. An invisible force spread out from his body, causing all the dust, rubble, and broken leaves to disappear. His body was now completely clean, and his face was expressionless. No one could read him, and no one could tell how he was feeling. Malloy, Luke, and Declan held their silence. They didn't dare say anything more. Although Bentley had an eccentric temperament, he was still the leader of the Han clan sub-branches. They had no idea how Bentley planned to deal with Zen. Bentley's personality had always been unpredictable though, to say the least. To everyone's surprise, Bentley laughed and said to Zen, "Good. Although I don't know how you've managed to cultivate such power, I think the old freaks on the floating island would be very happy to see a little freak just like you." Chapter 1795, Agreement. At last, Bentley's words quickly broke the tense atmosphere that blanketed the whole main hall. At the same time, Zen also sighed in relief, but he still firmly said, "If you still want to test me, I will leave the heavenly Han house. Everyone wants to go to the floating island, but this won't be my only chance." Upon hearing Zen's words, Malloy felt slightly moved. There were many highly talented proving godly warriors in the heavenly Han house, but most of them were wildly arrogant. However, none of them was actually sure that they would enter the floating island. Meanwhile, Malloy saw absolute confidence in Zen's face, and he believed that Zen was capable of doing so. Even if the heavenly Han house didn't help Zen, it wouldn't be too hard for him to enter the floating island. "Young man, it seems that you're still angry," Bentley said to Zen with a chuckle. "You almost broke my old bones, but I won't seek revenge for that. According to Master Malloy, you don't accept people with unknown origins," Zen abruptly said in a serious tone. Bentley blinked, and then turned to stare at Malloy. The real reason why they invited Bentley over was to discuss the said matter. However, Bentley attacked Zen once he had arrived. Apparently, he had discovered Zen's inexplicable power and was greatly interested in the younger man's true strength. "Who said you came from the unknown? Your name is Thad Luo, right? You were born in Misty Mountain Village, a suburb of Mirror City in the vast sky region. You are highly talented, have infinite power and have devoured strange objects since a young age. And, you have learned from powerhouses." The longer Bentley spoke, the wilder the tales that he fabricated. He even made up some stories about Zen's childhood. It sounded true at first, but after careful consideration, it didn't. However, Malloy looked quite happy. He guessed that Bentley was in favor of him. Bentley was still responsible for checking Thad's origins. Since the Han clan had been on the floating island for a long time, it was impossible for them to thoroughly investigate many things, so they believed whatever Bentley said without any doubts. In their case, as long as he could forge a fake identity for Thad, everything would go smoothly. What if? On the other hand, Luke appeared quite wary as he said, "It's not that I don't trust Thad, but if he is plotting something, then what should we do when his plot is exposed?" Bentley glared angrily at Luke. "Don't worry because you won't shoulder this responsibility. If that were to happen, the Han clan might be angry at me and dismiss me from my post. Then, you'd have a chance to succeed me as leader, he said with a trace of displeasure. I didn't mean that, Luke responded awkwardly. After that, Bentley simply ignored Luke and Declan. He looked rather unhappy a moment ago, but now his face was full of excitement. He turned to Zen and smiled. Are you satisfied now? Look how sincere I am. Can you teach me the secret to train strength? He finally asked. Only Bentley knew how truly terrifying Zen's strength was. The others had only seen several smashed walls, but they didn't know that Bentley had used up all his strength just to stabilize his body. Otherwise, it wouldn't just be smashed walls. His body might have been seriously damaged. It was true that it was unrealistic for a proving godly warrior to have such terrible power. It was simply beyond the scope of common understanding. Although the proving godly warriors trained by the wealthy clans on the floating islands were highly powerful as well, Bentley knew that they were nowhere on Zen's level. Even Pascal, who was currently considered to be the strongest, had been very fortunate in the divine refinement Forbidden Land, and cultivated an immense amount of power, was still much weaker than the current Thad when he was a world lord. Sorry, I can't, Zen answered stiffly, although he knew Bentley was joking. I'll give you the secret code of my clan as an exchange, Bentley urged even more. When Malloy heard Bentley speak about something so outrageous, he cleared his throat. Since Master Bentley has agreed to let Thad stay, should we wait until next year for the Han clan to come, or recommend him to the floating island right now? He suggested. Next year, Bentley hissed. If we wait until next year, we won't stand a chance, he sneered. What do you mean? Malloy asked in surprise. Truly, he didn't quite understand what Bentley meant. Yesterday, the 6th sub-branch already sent someone to the Time Sea, Bentley said coldly. The 6th sub-branch, Malloy muttered. His brows furrowed in confusion. If it was true, then the thing he was most worried about came true. The Han clan's 27 sub-branches weren't unitary. Now, a part of the powerhouses on the floating island came from some sub-branches, and those sub-branches were more closely related to the powerhouses of the Han clan. Joy, a demi-holy being, was from the 6th sub-branch. Many people had witnessed the purple or a godly way acknowledge Zen on that very day. Ever since then, Malloy had been a bit worried. It was known that Joy and all the sub-branches agreed that she would take anyone who could cultivate the purple or a godly way as her disciple. The Heavenly Han House had always complied with this agreement, and gave Joy all the girls who possessed the purple power bodies and those acknowledged by the purple or a godly way. However, Zen did not possess the purple power body. Although the purple or a godly way had indeed acknowledged him, there must be some other reason behind it. Joy was the Han clan's demi-holy being, only second to the Holy Emperor. Moreover, it was said that she had always been domineering in her clan and even the Holy Emperor had to give in to her. If she knew about Zen's case and wanted to take him away by force, the Heavenly Han House wouldn't be able to resist her. What Malloy hadn't expected was that the 6th sub-branch had acted so quickly. It had only been a few days, yet they had already sent someone to the Time Sea. What should we do then? Malloy asked anxiously. A small laugh escaped Bentley's lips. I acted faster. The second day after the test, I had ordered someone to go. I believe we can get ahead of the 6th sub-branch and have enough time to send Thad to the floating island. If Joy wants to recruit Zen, she will have to ask the Han clan, he said. An excellent move, Master Bentley, you're truly something. Malloy exclaimed. He couldn't help but sigh. Bentley's methods were always unpredictable, but it was true that he could anticipate possible future scenarios and was able to act accordingly and reasonably. As for Zen, he wasn't interested in the things that they discussed. Whoever helped him enter the floating island wasn't important, as he thought it would be best if Malloy forged an identity for him. If the Han clan didn't suspect anything, then the other great clans on the floating islands wouldn't have any doubts. After Zen had left the main hall, he didn't return to his own residence. Instead, he headed towards the money alley. Bentley had already informed the Han clan on the floating island, so Zen wouldn't have much time to stay in Six Burden Divine City. He had to hurry and investigate where the mud came from. He didn't expect the Heavenly Han House to help him condense the godly tile and become a true god. Thus, that piece of mud from the Tai clan was the key to condensing the godly tile. In the money alley, Lin sat and took care of her clan's stall. She looked as bored as ever as her eyes blankly stared into the distance. She didn't participate in the test of the Heavenly Han House this time. It wasn't that her clan wasn't able to get a slot, she could even get many slots easily with her way of management. However, her innate talent for cultivation was quite mediocre. If she relied on her own strength to condense the godly tile, it might take too long for her to progress. Therefore, she might have to implant an ownerless godly tile someday. Just then, Zen appeared in front of Lin. Her eyes immediately glowed with a strange light. Anyone who knew her would know that she would only look that way when she saw divine might coins. Clearly, Zen was like a heap of divine might coins in her eyes. Chapter 1796, Tai Clan. As soon as Lin saw Zen, a faint smile surfaced on her pretty face. "What are you going to buy this time?" she asked, cocking her head. "I dug out a few more pieces of mud." "Interested?" "What?" Zen was slightly surprised. His gaze fell to the stall before her. As she had said, several pieces of mud covered the panel. However, this time Zen's inner world did not react to the mud like it had last time. Clearly, these pieces of mud were ordinary. Zen smirked at her. This little girl was brazen enough to dig out a few pieces of mud straight from the ground and sell them unabashedly. Once the Tai clan sold the piece of mud to Zen, the curiosity of many members was piqued. Earlier, Lin's uncle, Alfred, had decided that the mud was not ordinary, but after many evaluations, the Tai clan lost their patience and handed over the mud to Lin without a second thought. No one in the clan knew about the use and origin of the piece of mud. Zen, naturally, was not aware of the internal affairs of the Tai clan. He also did not imagine that a series of ramifications would occur once he bought the piece of mud with so much money. The Tai clan never would have dreamed that someone could spend 500 divine might coins on some mud. It had caught them unaware. Certainly, Thad was not a fool in their eyes. The fact that he was willing to pay such a steep price for the mud, coupled with his astonishing performance in the Heavenly Han house, was enough to make the clan believe that the dirt was indeed highly valuable. Some of the Tai clan members had been regretful, thinking that Lin should have asked for a higher place. However, just a few days ago, there was still someone who had criticized her for her tactics. Lin did not care for the voices in the first place, but the pedantic elders in the clan were getting worse and worse. Even if this piece of mud was some extraordinary treasure, it was sold already and should now be irrelevant to them. To Lin, doing business meant pursuing the greatest gains, so she did not hesitate to ask for a high price. She felt it was her prerogative. However, she paid heed to honesty and integrity each time. No matter how much damage she incurred, she would not regret her approach. At this time, everyone in the Tai clan suddenly found themselves extraordinarily busy. This was not only because Devon was taking the Heavenly Han house's test, but also because of the piece of mud. The small hill where the Tai clan had dug out the piece of mud had been turned upside down in search for more treasure. They hoped to dig out a second piece of that exceptional mud, but so far, it was to no avail. Lin, on the other hand, had casually dug out some ordinary mud outside of the six-burden divine city. Each piece of mud was priced at 5 divine might coins. Seeing her sell it, some people bought the mud to try their fortunes. After all, Zen had spent 500 divine might coins before. They could buy identical pieces of mud using just 5 divine might coins. Each of them felt like they had stumbled on a fortune. Maybe there truly was something special about this mud. Meanwhile, Lin did not think she was deceiving anyone. No one knew of what use the mud was. Perhaps the piece Zen had bought was also ordinary. Perhaps he had been mistaken. Nearly every day, she sold those pieces of mud for 5 divine might coins each. It was a rare occurrence in the money alley. She managed to sell more than 20 pieces and earned the Tai clan more than 100 divine might coins. The true gods witnessing this felt their eyes go red with envy. Seeing how the little girl's mud was far too easy to sell, they started to follow her example one by one. Suddenly, quite a few stalls selling mud cropped up in Money Alley. Some of the true gods who were unaware of the truth were dumbstruck to see this happening. They suspected that the people of Money Alley were not in complete control of their senses. Who in their right mind would jump up to buy mud at such a hefty price? As more and more people sold mud, the competition grew intense. Some buyers made up stories of how incredible the mud was, about how it had proved to be a miracle medicine. But the true gods were not stupid. After being fooled by Lin for long, people no longer bought the mud after a point of time. Lin despised her imitating rivals. Now that the mud could no longer be sold, she racked her brain in order to come up with new ideas. The last thing she expected, however, was for Thad to appear before her again. "I won't buy anything today," Zen replied, shaking his head. Lin smiled faintly, as if she had sensed his thoughts. "I know what you want. You wish to find out where the mud was excavated, right?" "Not really." Zen chuckled as he scanned her face. He had indeed come for that matter, but since he knew that the little girl was far too crafty, why would he let her cheat him again? Oh, Lin's features revealed a trace of surprise. No, then what have you come here for? Lin was already scheming. The mountain where the piece of mud had been dug out was originally Tai clan's territory. Although it was now rather unsightly after all the digging, she reasoned that would still arouse Zen's interest. She planned to sell the entire mountain to Zen. It was a pity that she was unable to continue what she had formerly wanted to say. Zen's reply was different from what she had imagined. I'm looking for your brother, Devon. He promised me he would take me for a tour around Tai clan, Zen said with a smile. Before entering the consulting god hall, Zen had briefly come in contact with Devon. Devon was dull but honest, and it was far easier to deal with him than with his sister. However, Devon had not passed the test of the Heavenly Han House. Zen had not seen him after the test, so the only way he could look for him was through Lin. My brother, Lin furrowed her brows. She was still too young, after all. When her thoughts failed her, a dejected look surfaced on her features. She knew her brother's personality. He was a loyal, honest, and an obstinate man. He always followed through on what he promised. Even though Lin was very eloquent and persuasive, she could not change Devon's mind. If Zen had only come looking for Devon, Lin could not scam Zen again. What a pity, she thought to herself. However, after thinking for a while, she realized that Thad's popularity had spread like wildfire not so long ago. It was said that getting to the floating island would be a piece of cake for him. Thad was not the kind of person who would debase himself by getting roped in by the Tai clan. However, if they could be on good terms with each other, then in future it would benefit Tai clan when he won accolades. There were some favors that could not be traded for the divine might coin. Pondering on this, Lin did not hesitate. She told Zen that Devon was at their residence in the Sixth Burden Divine City. At the same time, she urged Zen to comfort her brother, who was rather down in the dumps these days. Devon ranked 56th in the name list. 67 warriors had passed the test of the Heavenly Han House. Naturally, Devon had been depressed after being eliminated. According to the rankings, he should have been able to pass the test, but it was a pity that getting the acknowledgement of the Godly Way tablets was not as per the rankings, rather it depended on one's own understanding of the Godly Way. Several proving godly warriors ranking 30 to 40 had failed the test, like Devon himself. Zen immediately agreed to Lin's request. The Tai clan had some property in the Sixth Burden Divine City. Following Lin's guidance, Zen quickly found Devon. Devon's mood these few days had indeed slumped, but his personality was such that he did not suffer too much of a blow. Instead, he made an ambitious decision. He did not pass the test this year, but he was sure to come back next year. And if he did not pass next year either, then he would try for the year after. He was determined to demonstrate his full abilities. For a proving godly warrior, a few decades was only a short period of time. 3 days later, Zen left the Sixth Burden Divine City under Devon's lead and headed toward the Tai clan. As the ancestral land of the Han clan, the Sixth Burden region was much larger in terms of the area it covered. Although the Tai clan was said to be just outside of the Sixth Burden Divine City, the distance it took to reach there was not short. It took them half a month to arrive at the place. For the Tai clan, Zen, the genius who had turned up out of the blue, was an honored guest. Apart from a round of warm hospitality, the Tai clan's elders wanted to draw out from Zen the true use of the mud. But how could Zen give them the explanation they wanted? In the end, he managed to dodge their queries. When the Tai clan saw that Zen was unwilling to answer, they did not pursue the matter further. Some rounds of entertainment later, Devon escorted Zen out of the Tai clan and headed to the mountain where they had dug out the piece of magical mud. When Zen arrived at the mountain and saw it full of potholes, he was rendered speechless. The earth was in disarray. It would not be an exaggeration to say that the Tai clan had dug deep into the ground to look for the mud. However, it seemed like they had gained nothing so far. Chapter 1797, Digging a Passageway. Thad was being quietly observed by some of the Tai clan members either sitting or standing around the mountain. It was known that a piece of mud could be sold for 500 divine might coins, which shocked everyone. The elders of the Tai clan announced that whoever dug out another piece of that mud would receive a generous reward. Wanting to try their luck to obtain the reward, everyone including women and children in the Tai clan moved out. But no matter how deep they dug, the mud would always turn out to be ordinary. They had never run into the kind of mud that could jump and run and would be spiritual again. Zen stood at the edge of the large pit. Looking down, he saw that the pit as deep as 3,000 feet was dug beneath the whole mountain. It was impossible for the divine citizens to dig such a huge pit in such a short amount of time. The true gods of the Tai clan must have been involved, and some of them seemed to be mid-rank true gods. Zen sighed in his heart. These true gods were truly different from what he had imagined. Living in the evolutionary universe, Zen had always thought that the true gods was a lofty existence. No one ever dared to offend them as they looked down upon all living beings below the true gods' level. They were out of touch, and nothing could stop them. After he arrived in the divine land, Zen discovered that these true gods were more like ordinary people to some extent. In order to preserve the purity of their mortal bodies, the martial artists of the evolutionary universe would usually choose not to eat grains, saving them a great deal of trouble. For those who continued to eat grain, they had to purify their bodies every once in a while. Only few true gods of the divine land chose not to eat. They only viewed all kinds of delicacies as a great pleasure. The Tai clan had many true gods, and due to the benefits of the 500 divine might coins, they had dug such a huge pit. Every single one of them were affected, controlled, and driven crazy by the divine might coins. Zen realized that this scene might have something wrong with it. He once again asked in his mind, Master Evil, what is the use of divine might coins? The divine might coin had a great value. For instance, a single divine might coin could be saved up by a proving godly warrior only after he or she struggled for many years. Zen became curious about the source of the value of the divine might coin. Why on earth did this piece of black disc have so much value? Hee. Master Evil laughed, I will only tell you after you enter the floating island. Now you can still let me keep you in suspense. Actually, almost everyone knows about the usage of the divine might coin. It's not a secret. The fact about the divine might coins was already known throughout the whole divine land, so it was hard for Zen to ask the others. If he didn't even have basic common sense, then his origins would be suspected again. Master Evil had tried to keep Zen in suspense a few times, and Zen couldn't force him. Zen slowly slid down at the edge of the pit, following the path that was dug out towards the bottom of the pit. Relying on his inner world, Zen could tell the difference between the special mud and ordinary mud. His inner world was like a starving dog. Once he got close to that special mud, it could not wait to send out its strong consciousness. Devon then followed closely behind Zen. He wasn't after anything but for the sake of safety. Since he was the one who forthrightly brought Zen to the Tai clan, he would definitely help him to the end. After some time, Zen arrived at the bottom of the pit. The entire pit was about 3,000 feet deep. Surrounding the pit was soft wet earth, and at the bottom was black gang. The black gang was very hard that even Zen could hardly break it. As he looked around, his inner world's consciousness didn't give out any ripple of reaction. Although he had mentally prepared himself for the outcome, he was still a bit disappointed. It was indeed hard to find that peculiar mud. It was already a luck for him to find a piece of it the first time, and the chances of finding it again here were very slim. My family members have been doing their best to find it during this period of time. If they were able to find a piece, they would definitely give it to you, Thad. Unfortunately, they didn't, Devon said while shaking his head. If Lynn heard what her brother had said, she would probably explode in anger. A piece of mud could be exchanged for 500 divine might coins from Thad. The Tai clan wasn't rich, and 500 divine might coins was a huge sum of money. How could they give the mud to him for free? For others to say these words, they would be seen like they were trying to please Zen. But it was a different case with Devon's honest personality, as he had always been a man of his own word. The Tai clan really wasn't that successful in digging out the mud, and once they had, Devon would surely offer it freely to Zen. It doesn't matter. It's already very fortunate for me to be able to find a clue, Zen responded with a smile. Zen continued to walk around the bottom of the pit. At the same time he kept paying attention to the movements of his inner world. He would surely know what it meant once it reacted. After circling the pit a few times, Zen asked, at that time, Lynn said that Alfred dug it out from under a big tree. I wonder where the tree was originally located. The place had already been dug out beyond recognition. All the trees had been moved, so he naturally could not see where they were located before. Our clan excavated this place with the tree as the center. Logically, it should be in the middle of the huge pit, Devon answered truthfully. Zen nodded and walked towards the center of the huge pit. Wandering around for a while, he couldn't help but let out a breath. He wasn't able to detect that type of mud, and didn't know the next time he would encounter it. If he couldn't get that mud, he would not be able to condense a godly tile. The primal chaos technique would reach its end, and becoming a true god would be impossible. How could he achieve his larger ambitions and plans? Did you find anything? Devon asked in concern. A wry smile appeared on Zen's face as he shook his head. Well, let's climb up and have a look. With nothing left to discover in the pit, Zen could only once again walk around. He was already clear that the chances of finding the mud outside the pit were much lower. Devon was also slightly disappointed. He had obtained the approval from the Tai clan the time he invited Zen into the Tai clan. Some members of the Tai clan might covet the divine might coins, and were strongly opposed to outsiders entering this place, but Devon believed that it would be better to befriend Thad than to earn that bit of divine might coins. A clan could not develop without divine might coins, but the divine might coin could not decide everything. Just as Zen was about to climb up the side, he suddenly felt a slight tremor in his body. His entire body froze on the spot, a strange look flashing through his eyes. It seems to be here, Zen thought in his heart. The movements within his inner world were rather weak, but he was still able to detect them. His inner world's consciousness was not very sure towards this special mud as its reaction was very weak. Yet, it still sent a signal to Zen. Thad? Devon asked curiously as he saw Zen suddenly stopped. Zen turned around and smiled at Devon, asking, "Can I dig here?" "Of course, go ahead," Devon uttered and waved his hand. He sincerely hoped that Zen would find what he was looking for. Zen reached for his sword hilt and pulled his sword fiercely. The great weighty sword appeared in his hand. Twisting it lightly caused the great weighty sword to spin and pierce towards the side of the pit. Plop! The great weighty sword touched the soft soil and the power within was like an invisible ripple, spinning along the soil. By the time he withdrew his great weighty sword, a circular passageway about 60 to 70 feet long had appeared in front of him. This passageway seemed to have been carved out of the tip of a sharp knife. It clearly showed Zen's powerful ability to use strength. Without the slightest hesitation, Zen charged into the passageway in the blink of an eye. The moment he entered the passageway, the consciousness in his inner world gradually became clearer, making his heart beat faster and faster. It seemed like that kind of special mud was more than just a piece. Reaching the end of the passageway, Zen stabbed out with his sword once again. He was like a mouse completely immersed in digging a long and narrow hole. Chapter 1798. Digging Deep. Devon refrained himself from following Zen into the cave. The members of the Tai clan above the giant pit had paid close attention to Zen's activities. They showed interest when they felt Zen had discovered something. But needless to say, right now they felt a bit disappointed. They could only watch helplessly while this outsider called Thad kept digging in their territory. It was obvious that nobody would be happy about it. And the frustrating part was that they could not even identify the object. They had spent all their time digging on the mountain, which by now had formed a huge pit. But they still could not find any more mud. Whereas, Zen had just arrived and already found some clues. Even if Thad finds some mud, should we just let him take it with him? I am not in the favor of allowing some random outsider to take us for granted. But what options are we left with? Suppose we find the mud. Then what do we do about it? What good would that do? Should we ask Lin to sell it? Don't you know that there are mud sellers everywhere in the money alley right now? Some of the Tai clan members realized the crux of the problem. They were in deep thought with this realization. Even if they found the mud that possessed intelligence, they wouldn't be able to sell it for much money in the money alley. Others would definitely show hesitation in believing their words. Who could affirm that it was the same sort of mud that Zen had bought from them? And if at all it could be proved that it was the similar mud, what use could it bring to others? Nobody knew the purpose of this mysterious mud except for Zen himself. And to make matters worse, there were rumors that Zen and the Tai clan had joined hands to sell a nominal piece of mud for an enormous price just to deceive those who were completely unaware of the truth. The elders of the Tai clan were not dim-witted. They had listened to Devon's suggestion and allowed him to invite Zen over to the Tai clan after careful consideration. Even if the mud that Zen wanted was indeed rare, it was the result of Zen's discerning eyes. They would have to allow Zen to take it. The tunnel that Zen had created was horizontal. He kept changing positions in the long and narrow cave, going by the movements of his inner world. As he followed the path in the cave and excavated a distance of over 1,000 feet, his inner world suddenly became still. Looks like I've gone too far, Zen concluded. He turned around and walked down the tunnel as he paid close attention to the changes in his inner world. When his inner world became active again, he immediately stopped. This is where it is. It should be around here. Zen did not let others know that he was not very confident in his judgment. He was completely relying on his inner world's reaction towards the mud. Hence, he could only roughly sense a location. With this current location in mind, he began digging downwards with his great weighty sword. So now he created a vertical tunnel. Earlier, Zen had returned from the bottom of the pit, and climbed up 400 feet. Now, after he went downwards and dug 400 feet, his great weighty sword touched the solid gang and made a sharp clanging sound. He had reached the gang layer. Although the top layer of the earth was soft, its texture and weight were not to be underestimated. In truth, the soil in the divine land was very heavy. A handful of soil here could be as heavy as a mountain in the evolutionary universe. As for the solid gang below, it was even more astonishing. Even if Zen wanted to dig deep into it, it would be quite an arduous effort. Therefore, the Thai clan had to stop at the gang layer after they dug a huge pit here. After arriving at this spot, Zen found that the consciousness in his inner world was becoming more active. Because the consciousness was not that of a living being, it could not clearly express what was down there. Anyway, this was the same case when Zen got the mud in the money alley. Of course, Zen wouldn't give up here. No matter how hard the gang was, he would put all his efforts in going down. Bang, bang, Zen kept hammering his great weighty sword downwards. It had been very easy for him to dig into the soil. He hadn't used too much strength, and only used a certain amount of skill to easily carve out a smooth opening. But now, he had to use more of his strength source. Because of the power-packed intensity of the great weighty sword, the solid gang was suddenly covered with cracks. He thrust the sword once more, and the cracked gang crumbled into miniature rocks and scattered everywhere. Boom, 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 Zen continued to cut through the solid gang situated under the ground. Although he was about 3,000 feet underground, the hammering sound still reverberated back to the surface of Earth, along with the violent tremors. The people of the Thai clan felt like there were earthquake tremors under their feet. Oh my goodness, he has dug through the gang layer. Is he really that strong enough to do that? What a feat! The gang layer is so solid that it would be extremely difficult to dig deep into it even for a mid-rank true god. He definitely possesses the strength. Otherwise, why would the heavenly Han house have such high hopes on him? After all, he's a true genius who has the right to enter the floating island. The Thai clan members continued to be in awe as the ground shook beneath their feet. What they did not know was that Zen had earlier defeated Bentley, who was a top-ranked true god. Zen had even managed to destroy several walls of the heavenly Han house. Of course the Han clan couldn't possibly let this news spread outside. Hence, the Thai clan were completely unaware of these developments. Boom, boom, huge explosions reverberated in the air, and a thin layer of sweat formed on Zen's forehead. By now, he had dug 70 to 80 feet down through the gang layer. The consciousness in his inner world also responded more and more strongly. It became clear they were very close in reaching their target. It shouldn't be too far now, Zen said, wiping the sweat from his forehead. He raised the great weighty sword again as he shouted, "Demolish now!" Bang! This time, after he thrust his sword downwards, he actually felt the sword sink. Finally he pierced through something. It was difficult to see what sort of material the sword had sunk into. Everything was in total darkness. It was impossible for the sunlight to reach so deep within. Zen stretched out his hand and patted the area where the sword had sunk, lightly. A tiny wisp of flame clambered along the great weighty sword and began to burn. Under the illumination of the flame, he saw that a fist-sized hole had formed near his feet. The bottom of the gang layer is empty, Zen's face revealed a touch of gratification. He abruptly smashed down the great weighty sword through the last layer of the gang. As he fell onto the hollow space below, he stabbed the great weighty sword into the gang, and his entire body hung on the sword hilt in midair. Soon, with a flick of his hand, Zen summoned a ball of fire. The fire was extremely pure, and the light it emitted was very bright. It was the ball of elementary fire. After comprehending the elementary fire godly way, perhaps it did not have a great increase in his strength, but it did have many other wonderful uses. Under the illumination of the ball of fire, Zen was able to clearly see the scene below him. It was a cave with a width of over 10,000 feet. In the middle of the cave was a 200 feet wide square brown rock. As Zen intently gazed at the rock, he suddenly felt a movement behind him. He quickly pulled his sword from the gang and felt himself plummeting inside the cave. As he was falling, Zen quickly rolled over and could make out a black form at the top of the cave. The black form looked like a figure made out of mud. The form had stretched out its thin needle-like hand and intended to launch a sneak attack on Zen's back. After that attack failed, its needle-like hand rapidly transformed into the shape of a gecko's claw that pressed against the top of the cave and began to climb up. Swish, 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 the mysterious thing emitted a series of strange sounds as it climbed. Its speed was extremely fast and it quickly disappeared from Zen's vision. This thing, is it the same sort of mud as I absorbed? When Zen saw the form, he felt a surging consciousness within his inner world. It was almost exactly the same way he had felt in the money alley. Right now, the consciousness within his inner world was constantly reminding Zen to swallow that form. And he must do it immediately. Of course, Zen would not let this chance slip by. The moment he landed on the ground, he infused enough strength into his legs and jumped up, shooting towards the spot where the black form had disappeared. Bam! Zen once again inserted his sword into the gang so that he could hang himself at the top of the cave. He looked at the wall at the top of the cave with a slight frown. He had clearly seen that the black thing had disappeared from this spot. Then where did it vanish? There was only a layer of glossy black gang above him. There was no place to hide. Was it possible that the black thing had hidden itself into the gang? Chapter 1799, Cage. A puff of air escaped Zen's lips. After a careful examination, he still didn't find any clues. The consciousness that passed from his inner world was still very strong, but he could no longer determine the direction through his inner world after he entered the cave. The only thing he had done was to pull the great weighty sword out from the gang and place it steadily on the ground. The inside of the cave was absolutely silent. It seemed that no living creature had entered it for countless years. Anyone who was well versed in geology and geomancy would be dumbstruck to see such a large cave in the gang layer. Generally speaking, the whole divine land had a smooth and neat topography. Its outermost layer was composed of ordinary soil. Underneath it was a layer of gang, beneath the gang was a layer of flint that was 100 times tougher than the gang, and below the flint was a layer of soft stone. The soft stone was flexible enough that even a top-rank true god would find it hard to break it. Green magma, known as the lethal fire magma, flowed under the soft stones. This magma was so dangerous that even if a holy being fell into it, they wouldn't be able to escape. For so many years, numerous true gods had explored the forbidden lands while the holy beings had seen the chaos outside the divine land. However, no one still knew what exactly was in the core of the divine land. Over 100 divine eras ago, there had been 3 holy beings who had been in the lethal fire magma. One of them died, and the other 2 had gotten injured. In the end, they had no choice but to retreat. It was because of that reason that many true gods believed that they were still far from truly understanding the divine land, and the related rumor that had spread throughout the wealthy clans on the floating islands wasn't exactly true. The gang layer was considered as the second layer of the divine land. Most of the caves in the divine land were on the soft soil. In addition, it was nearly impossible for large caves to be formed on the gang layer due to the pressure under the soil that had been there for countless divine eras. Zen slowly moved his great weighty sword across the cave. The tip of the sword emitted a beam of clean light. Since Zen couldn't find the black thing, he explored the cave first. While the sheer size of the cave was astounding, the cave's most striking part was the round stone in its center. As Zen walked to the side of the round rock, he found that there was something odd when he took a closer look. What is that thing? He and Master Evil in his mind cried out at the same time. On top of the circular stone that was 200 feet wide, were a man and a woman lying down. However, they looked to be in a very strange situation. Their hands and feet seemed to be embedded on the rock, and it looked like they grew out from the stone. But that wasn't what made Zen and Master Evil truly shocked. What was even stranger was that the 2 people on top of the rock had weird faces and gave off an unsettling aura. Their faces were formed from several identical faces which had been put together, but despite their oddness, they looked natural. It was as if they were born to be like that. The woman had a total of 4 faces, and by human standards, they were all devastatingly beautiful. Each of the faces varied from being happy, sad, angry, and joyful. Aside from their faces, their hands and feet were also quite special. Lastly, their torsos were embedded deep into the rock. Is there such a race in the divine land? Asked Zen. It was his first time to see such creatures. During Zen's time in the divine land, he had learned and absorbed all kinds of knowledge he could about the divine land. There were undoubtedly many kinds of races in the divine land. However, there weren't much differences between those races and the human race, especially after the divine citizens managed to become true gods. Absolutely not. They are not living creatures at all. I'm guessing it's a stone statue that has been thrown here, Master Evil answered with certainty. Master Evil was someone who was experienced and knowledgeable. He didn't dare say that he understood the entire divine land, but such a strange race living in the stones had completely surpassed his understanding of the word, creature. That was why he was so sure. On the other hand, Zen scratched his head, as he wasn't so sure. But since the special mud had appeared here, it should be related to the people on the stone. The only thing was that he didn't know how to figure out the secret and how they were related. I should look for that thing first. With a huff, Zen looked away. The 2 people might have been embedded in the rock for who knew how long, and they themselves seemed to have turned into brown stones. Yet when Zen looked at the woman, he felt that she was also staring at him. It really unnerved him. At that moment, Zen sensed a sudden fluctuation in the space behind him. Whoosh, it's here, he exclaimed. Needless to say, he was overjoyed. After all, his purpose in coming to the cave was to find that mysterious mud. Lin had once told Zen that when her uncle had caught that piece of mud, it was black in color and could walk and jump. Therefore, he believed that it was the thing that had launched a surprise attack on him. He had been searching for it, but now it actually came out of its own accord. In turn, Zen wasted no time and attacked with his sword. The flames of the great weighty sword burned hotly. When Zen struck with it, it released a strong wave of fire. Boom! The sword slashed at an extremely hard object, and Zen's arm trembled so bad that he felt it grow numb. The great weighty sword itself definitely wasn't light. Even though the materials in the divine land were generally a lot tougher than the materials in the evolutionary universe, he could still use the great weighty sword to cut through the layer of gang easily. However, he had never expected that there was actually something that could block his sword strike. Whoosh! The moment the great weighty sword bounced back, Zen's body slid backwards like a ghost. He held the great weighty sword against his chest and cautiously checked his surroundings. Not too far away was a noticeable piece of rock, which turned out to be a gang. What is going on? As time passed, Zen got more and more shocked by the turn of events. He had already explored the whole cave before he had examined the circular stone. He didn't see the protruding gang, which meant that it had silently grown behind him. Moreover, normal gang couldn't resist his sword attack, but that gang was far stronger than normal gang. Zen, this cave has changed. The entrance seems to have disappeared as well. Master Evil reminded him. Zen sighed. What Master Evil had said was true. His lips curved into a frown as he looked up at the top of the cave. His jaw dropped when he saw that the entrance that he had just dug had disappeared. Zen looked more than wary. He had gone to many dangerous places over the years, but he was able to handle them all. This cave, however, was beyond his understanding. Whoosh! Just then, he suddenly felt something move beneath his feet. His eyes flashed and he exerted force on his heels, which caused his whole body to tumble. Whoosh! 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 Pieces of thin, sharp gang shot out from the ground like rapidly growing stalagmites. Then, the sharp protrusions tried to pierce him. The toughness of the special gang was on par with Zen's great weighty sword. It could even injure a normal true god, let alone a proving godly warrior. Meanwhile, Zen surprisingly rolled away quite fast. However, the gang that protruded from the ground was slightly more powerful. It wasn't long before the entire cave was densely packed with sharp rocks, just like a monster nest filled with spikes. During the entire process, Zen moved constantly. As soon as he stopped, however, a rock flew out from beneath him. In the end, he could only grit his teeth and leap upwards towards the round stone. The moment he leapt through the air, many sharp, slender pieces of gang stretched out for several hundred feet from both the top and bottom of the cave. They were like long snakes that coiled themselves up to bite him. Boom, boom, boom. In turn, Zen slashed the rapidly growing needles of gang with his great weighty sword. With the help of the momentum from the attack, he finally got to jump onto the round rock. Rumble. However, the series of unfortunate events weren't done. Zen was shocked to discover that just as he stepped on the round stone, the entire cave began to quake. There was nothing wrong with his judgment, as no sharp thorns grew on the round stone. However, hundreds of stalagmites grew out from the top of the cave and began to envelope both him and the round stone. Chapter 1800. A movable cave. The members of Tai clan remained waiting outside. Devon stood at the side of the crater with a look of hesitation on his face as he looked at the passage dug out by Zen. There were strong vibrations felt earlier from Zen hitting the gang layer, but it stopped after a while. They could only guess that the young man had finally given up. It was already hard for Devon's elders to deal with the gang layer, what more could Zen do? Besides, there was nothing underneath anyway. After brewing in silence for so long, Devon couldn't help but want to go in to see what happened. At that moment, his two uncles Alfred and John slid down from the edge of the crater. Alfred had been the one to find the mud last time, but digging out the entire crater was a team effort between him and John. Hasn't Thad come out yet? The elders of Tai clan had since paid attention to this place but never appeared here because it was inconvenient for them. After Thad got in touch with Devon, they figured that the young ones would be able to deal with this matter. However, a long time had passed but there was still no movement, which caused them to worry. Thad was a popular figure in the Heavenly Han house. If something bad happened to him, then the Tai clan would surely suffer. Devon shook his head. No, he hasn't yet. Alfred and John threw each other meaningful looks. Maybe it's time we go in and have a look. We have to make sure he's safe, Alfred suggested. Don't worry, He won't encounter any danger. John smiled languidly. This place wasn't far away from the six-burden divine city, and the Tai clan had been stationed here for a long time now, so no powerful, vicious beasts would dare to stay in the nearby vicinity. However, John still went after Alfred into the passage, followed closely by Devon. "Be careful, there is a hole under your feet," Alfred reminded them. Nonetheless, the three ventured forward and eventually reached a dead end. "Thad must have gone down that hole we saw just now. We should go down and have a look," Alfred said. He was very sensitive and could guess what might have been Zen's thoughts when he ventured inside. The young man might have felt something wrong and decided to turn back to go down the hole. "You don't have to go down, Devon. I can go with John." The two traversed the hole and immediately came upon a surprising scene at the bottom. "My goodness, Thad has shattered the gang layer," Alfred exclaimed. "But where is he? That's odd. There are no other passages. He must surely be down here. It's impossible for him to go anywhere else," John remarked in puzzlement. Alfred squat down to help him think better. There was no doubt that this current situation was incredibly perplexing. "Look, there's a tiny hole. It looks like it was made by a blunt weapon. It should be Thad's weapon. The space below should be empty and he hung here by using his weapon." However, Alfred himself still remained confused by his own speculation. He had a hunch that he was right, but there was a thick gang layer on the ground which did not match the marks left behind by Thad. John, on the other hand, was even more confused. "Do you mean there is a big cave beneath the gang? And that cave has moved somewhere else?" "According to the marks here, yes. But that couldn't be," Alfred explained. John's heart pounded with excitement. "Let's dig further," he exclaimed, eager to dig up even more secrets in their territory. Thad had come to the Tai clan's territory and was lucky enough to stumble upon the mud. The Tai clan was generous and let him take it for himself in order to build an amicable relationship with the future talent. However, if other rare treasures were found, then they would definitely take a share. If they did manage to find treasures here, then they might rise to a second-tier clan almost immediately. With this in mind, Alfred and John continued digging the passage Zen had made. However, despite the two of them being true gods, they still found it difficult to remove the gang. They were able to dig down 500 feet, but only gang awaited for them below. Finally, they had no choice but to give up and climb their way back to the passage. Inside the cave, Zen knew that the cave he previously dug had disappeared and the one he was in was completely sealed. The rocks above him effectively sealed him in and kept changing in color, from black to light green. The color of the walls was also different. What happened? Zen asked himself in wonder. These special pieces of gang around him were very hard, but it wouldn't be difficult to break them down if he used his full power. The problem though was that he had no idea what was going on. Human nature often made one afraid of the unknown, and Zen had zero clue what was in this cave. "I don't know either. I've been to 3 forbidden lands and even managed to sneak into the Soul Wilderness, but I haven't seen anything like this," Master Evil said. Zen was only trying to find a piece of mud. Why did he meet such a bizarre thing? As he ruminated his current situation, Zen suddenly saw that black thing appear not too far away. It took the shape of a starfish and slowly scaled the wall. As it moved, it left streaks of colorful mucus, and soon enough, the walls began to change. Huge shadows began to appear on the translucent green walls. Each shadow looked like a gigantic monster with a massive head and long arms. "There's something in the walls," Zen said. "What are those shadows? Why are they growing bigger?" Master Evil asked, his tone laced with both shock and intrigue. Zen shook his head. "It's not that they're becoming bigger. They're walking towards me in the walls." Huge living beings were indeed approaching from behind the translucent walls, almost as if they were about to burst in. "I think you'd better find a way to escape as soon as possible," Master Evil suggested. Zen might have retained quite a bit of his strength, but their current situation was too weird and dangerous to take lightly. Master Evil felt that this might be a trap set up by that black thing. The Forbidden Lands were the most dangerous places in the Divine Land. Everyone knew that. In fact, there were some Forbidden Lands that even holy beings found difficult to enter. Outside the Forbidden Lands was the world of the true gods. Ordinary vicious beasts could never hope to survive outside the Forbidden Lands. Any beast that managed to venture out and live outside the Forbidden Lands was most probably extremely powerful and terrifying. Not even holy beings dared fight with these beasts, since they most likely had strong, hidden powers that could prove fatal to an unsuspecting opponent. Zen couldn't possibly deal with them right now. In Master Evil's opinion, the beasts in this cave were the ones with strong hidden powers. They most likely had devoured quite a number of true gods over the years. "I think I might need to escape," Zen affirmed as he stared at the swaying shadows behind the walls. His eyes, however, remained affixed to the squirming black mud on the wall. That mud might have summoned all those shadows behind the wall. The wisest choice was to leave this place as soon as possible, however, Zen's inner world thought otherwise. That mud was too important. If he wanted to condense the godly tile as soon as possible, then he needed to take the risk and go all out. Zen did not delay any longer. He reached out and grabbed 2 stalagmites above his head, and the power of the 9 divine stars began to rapidly circulate.